capacity and pray that we may be here with open ears to hear and to understand and be able to make wise decisions this day. And we offer this prayer in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Councilmember Morrison, Councilmember McCall. We appreciate your opening ceremonies. We'll move on to item 3, our upcoming events. We have a little event coming up that people are excited about with Touch a Truck. That'll be really nice. I think we'll be have a really good turnout. I think this year a lot of people are excited about it. That'll be May 5th at 2025 at 6 p.m. We're asking if the staff can be over there, or people can be over there around 4 to help get prepared and get ready for that with some of the cooking and things that needs to take place over there. We have at the barn, we have our music circle. That is May 25th of 2025.
What is that exactly? I've heard of that before, the music circle.
Yeah, do you want to explain it, Carrie, a little bit more?
Yeah, the Art Council and Mark Randall has had that up where they just have an opportunity for anybody to come and play. So any instrument show up and they play for each other, or they collaborate and play together. People come just to listen. So it's really just an opportunity to have this little music jam session. There's been a variety of ages that have attended and they seem to enjoy it. So great. We have some cookies.
It's kind of fun, I think, for people to do that. So, and then we have our, and remember that's on May 25th at 7 p.m. And then we'll have our senior lunch bunch on May 28th, and then it'll be at 11:30 a.m. We're getting more and more people out to our senior lunch. We have new people that are coming out, so I think people really enjoy having it over at the barn, and it's been a good activity for them. We'll move on to item number 4, action on consent agenda. On item A, we have a special city council minutes. The meeting was held on April 8th. And we also have item B on here, cap construction for $109,509.02. We have item C for CTX Incorporated for $116,411.50. We have item D for Anderson Asphalt for $142,872.47. We have item E for Thorogood Excavating Incorporated for $101,029. And we have item F for Cottonwood Title Insurance Agency for $53,799. Any questions and concerns from the council on the consent agenda? Nothing, seeing none, I'm ready for a motion.
Move to approve consent agenda items A, B, C, D, E, and F.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further questions or from the council? Okay, we'll do a roll call on this. Councilmember Morse.
Aye.
Councilmember Dixon.
Aye.
Councilmember Call. Councilmember Schwab.
Aye.
And Councilmember Summer.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. We'll move on to item 5 on here. Our introduction of our city planner, Damian Rodriguez. Turn it over to Stephen.
Yeah, I'll let Damon do most of the introduction, but this is Damian Rodriguez. He's our new planner. Today is his first day, and we just asked him to be here to give us a little introduction.
Yeah, so that's me. I've been serving as your city planner, and again, day 0 really, because I'm still getting credentialed up and getting access to my computer and everything. But I will be available by email and phone here at the municipal office if anybody needs me. Again, that's Damian Rodriguez. I'm coming from Ogden City, where I had 3 years of experience, and prior to that, I was at the University of Utah.
Very nice.
Cool, welcome.
Thank you.
So I would just add, so Damian has a degree from Weber State in economics.
That's right. Yeah, my undergraduate was at Weber State.
Great.
Yeah, and a teaching assistant. Did you help teach economics too?
I was a research assistant at Weber State, but yes, then I was a teaching assistant at the U, where I taught city economics.
Yeah, and so he's going to be helpful as we talk about our economic development plan, which is going to start up here shortly. And so he also has a degree in urban planning. No, master's, right? Master's degree.
Yeah, that's right.
In
From
urban
the U.
planning.
Mhm.
So, anyways, we're thrilled to have him. He's gonna make a great contribution. He's a resident here as well.
Oh, cool.
So lives over, kind of by Privendale Park area.
Fantastic. By me, whereabouts?
By me.
I am actually in Haven Parkway, so not far at all. Creville Park.
So anyways, we're grateful.
So just, I mean, I don't know if we can really quickly maybe just introduce everybody if you don't know who the council members are, but my name's Rob Vanderwood. I'm the mayor.
Brian Saunders, council member.
Kim Dixon, council. Very calm.
Ryan Swap, council.
Tina Morrison, I'm sure you can guess, council.
Nice to meet you all.
And then I don't know if you've met the staff or not.
Yeah,
Maybe.
let's
Is
keep
everybody-
going.
I'm Emily Prina, the city board.
We've met.
Timothy Damon, Young City Engineer.
Brock Randall, Park Rec Cemetery Director. Meet you, Brad.
You need Amy's finance director.
Sean.
Hey, Sean.
Hey.
Excellent.
Treasurer, Ryan.
Yeah. Ryan, we're gonna introduce you to Damien. He's our city planner, just started today. So Ryan is our treasurer and helps with finance and.
Nice to meet you, Ryan. Nice to meet you.
Anyway, thanks for the introduction, everyone. I think we're glad to have you. And,
Thank you.
Yeah,
glad you
welcome.
could say. And we'll move on to item 6, action on resolution 20-2025, awarding the bid for the 3300 South Improvement Project. Turn that over to you, Ed.
Mayor.
Yeah.
So, council, where we've been pursuing the 3300 South Road Improvement Project, we completed the utility phase and Rocky Mountain Power is relocating the poles. We had requested bids for the actual road widening construction, and we received 7 bids on April 10th. The low bid was Staker Parson Company at $2,157,000 even. As council's aware, we've had a lot of success with Staker Parson on various projects. So staff is fully supportive, recommending the council with a contract to Staker Parsons for the 3300 road improvement project in the amount of $2,157,000. We'll also make a note that in my staff report, I do reference a potential interlocal agreement with the Taylor West Weaver Water Improvement District. That's not on the council's agenda for this meeting. We'll brought to you the next time. Essentially, it's something similar that we did on the original 3300 South project where Weaver Basin had decided to undertake a concurrent project with our project, and we sort of offset some costs from the city project that they were going to incur, so we had to enter into a reimbursement agreement with them. And our agreement with Taylor was Weaver, similar agreement.
I got a question. The acronym, how do you say that? T triple
I
double?
don't even know. It's easier than writing out Taylor, West Weaver.
I'm with you, but yeah, I've never said triple double.
Wid.
before.
Wid.
Sounds good.
With a rolling W.
Come close to that.
Okay, any questions for our engineer on that project?
Council, you know, the intent is to have the sidewalk completed by the time school starts. The road should be in, hopefully at least road phase condition at that point.
That'd be great. Things are progressing well on 2700. Looks
They are.
good over there. Good. Any questions? If not, I'm ready for a motion.
I would just like to say this bid goes to Staker, but Staker has within this bid subbed to our fence company, Mountain Fence.
Oh.
I will recuse myself if you'd rather.
I noticed they also had some of the bidders, Folsom was involved with it, some others too, so. Okay, no, I think that's well noted. Thank you. Any other questions? If not, I'm ready for motion.
I would move that we approve resolution 20-2025 and award the bid for the 3300 South Improvement Project to Staker Parsons for $2.157 million.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this project? Okay, we'll do a roll call on this one. Councilmember Dixon.
Aye.
Councilmember Saunders. Councilmember Schwab.
Aye.
And Councilmember Morse.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. And Councilmember Call, recused in that vote. All right. Item 7 on here, action on resolution 21-2025. Memorandum of understanding between West Haven City and Green Farms Community LLC.
Yeah, I'll start and Rock might jump in as well to help clarify. So this is a memorandum of understanding. Amy's here as well, and she helped draft this MOU, so she can speak to it as well. But as way of an overview, Nilsson Homes came to us and recognized that they have an obligation of $30,000 in financial contribution. It was originally slated and still is until you adopt or consider this MOU to be spent at a pavilion on open space number 5. And from the developer's perspective, and the city agreed, they felt like, or we felt as a consensus, that money would be better spent and better yield a better public benefit if it was moved over to Poulter Pond. And so the idea is that they would honor that obligation, but do it in a way that meets our needs and the public needs. Specifically, as we look at Poulter Pond as it's starting to get built out, they certainly have obligations. As you know, the city also has obligations, and then there's shared obligations. And what we're trying to accomplish is to do as much of the hardscaping as possible so we can move on to some of the less intensive developments that will have less disturbance on the land. And so with that 30,000, what's being recommended is that we use those funds to install a trail that would continue to provide asphalt loop around the whole Poulter Pond. Because right now, what's slated is a portion of it is an asphalt trail, and that's the regional trail portion that continues on northward on the east side of the pond. But on the west side of the pond, it was planned as road base, with the idea that if there were funds available or at some future point, the city can enhance it with a hard surface. And we feel like that would be the best use of those funds. And so that's what's being proposed. There's also, oh, please.
One of the thoughts behind that is, as we look to try to enhance it with more amenities, it's probably easier for us to go and land a grant for a pavilion or a playground or things like that versus building that and trying to get a grant for a trail. And so being able to implement the trail, then I think it'd be much easier to obtain a grant for a pavilion at our pond rather than trying to just add asphalt essentially. So they look more favorable in a grant cycle than asphalt. So
the other thing, and Brock can speak more to this, is he's been working on trying to line up grants. But as I mentioned, there's obligations from each party, and those obligations are formalized within an agreement. And part of this agreement envisions that if at the end of the project, if there were funds still remaining, contingency funds, that we could essentially look to use those funds to better enhance the facility with different amenities. And so what's being proposed in this MOU is that we change some of those priorities based in part upon different grant applications or other opportunities that we feel like might be better, that we might be more successful at. So, Brock, do you have any insight more than that?
yeah, we feel like that in our best interest to try to do all the hardscaping, like all of the curbing around the playground potential, the pavilion pads, things like that, where we have that limited development where they have to apply for anything. We currently have a grant application in the outdoor recreation or Utah Outdoor Recreation Grant, which is going to help us with a few of those bullet point items as well, as far as some of the shoring material, some of the shoreline material, vegetation, irrigation. So we're hopeful that we'll land that grant. And then the harder grants to obtain is the hardscape. So by prioritizing some of those contingency funds to knock out some of the sidewalks and barriers, that we can use some of the other that's easier again to obtain through the grant process. So that's the hope. We should hear back on the outdoor recreation grant. We are assuming any day now. So
we did put this on the agenda obviously for today, and part of that is that they are anxious to get paving, and we think the paving season will start within a couple weeks. And so we would get the same unit price as was locked in a year ago, so they feel really good about the price. And essentially, we anticipate, as I mentioned, relative to that paving of the trail, that the majority of that 30,000 will cover what's anticipated to be the expense. So if you do approve it tonight, then we'll work with Milton Homes, get the MOU signed and alert the contractor to including that portion within the project scope, and we'll move forward.
How big is, it has some, on the legend over here, it has a sod, it has a gravel area and seed area. And it has the square footage, it looks like on there, but it doesn't have how long the trail is. How long is that? How much you putting down?
1,000, I think it was 1,000.
Yeah.
Or
I
I would think the bid price was about $30 a lineal foot.
Yeah.
And it was for an 8-foot trail, although I think the plans call for 8 foot 6 inches, so I think we'll construct according to the approved plans, and so it'll be somewhere in 33,000 is what we estimate.
Is that going out to bid? Are they bidding it or are they doing it?
It would be Castle Rock would be taking care of that, along with that section that they're required to pave on the east side of the pond.
So gonna pay that, is it 2650? Is that the name of the road?
36, the top of it,
3650.
36.
Yeah, 3650 is online to be paved along with this trail.
Yeah, I've seen some bids, you know, for square footage, just square foot, not by the foot, because we're talking about 6 feet. Are you doing 6 or 9 feet wide for the trail?
On the trail, it's 8.5 feet.
8.5.
Yeah. So our other trails, our main artery trails are 10 feet wide with a foot of road-based material to kind of shoulder the trail. But on some of these smaller ones, we like walking paths and things like that. Some of those small ones like this, it's slated for 8.5 feet.
Okay, any questions? Okay, I'm ready for a motion.
To approve action on resolution 21-2025 memorandum of understanding between West Haven City and Green Farm Community LLC.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this item? Okay, we'll do a roll call on this one. Councilmember Saunders. Councilmember Morse.
Aye.
Councilmember Schwab.
Aye.
Councilmember Call.
Aye.
And Councilmember Dixon.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries on that. Anything good for that, Shane? All right, thank you for getting through that part. Now we'll get on to the fun stuff again. Here we go for some budget stuff on item 8. Budget discussion. The council will discuss the current 2024-25 budget and proposed 2025-26 tentative budget, including but not limited to revenues, expenses, and capital projects within the general fund, capital project fund, the cemetery fund, and storm water fund. And again, thank you for you guys being here, everyone that's here for the budget and talk about it. So turn some time over to our city manager.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Warnke.
Yeah, and thank you everyone for being here. I know it's a work day for a lot of council members, and so we appreciate you taking the time to come. It is appreciated. So just a few items I thought I'd mention before I start in earnest. There are some snacks behind you, and so don't want those not to be consumed. So feel free, and the city staff to get up and have some refreshments. And city staff might come and go a little bit. I certainly want them here, and we certainly want you to have all the information that you need in order to prepare for approving the tentative budget, realizing that once the tentative budget's approved, there's still several weeks and opportunities to continue the conversation up until the final budget. So, but it's a great opportunity to ask questions. So feel free to do so. And with that, I'll I'll go ahead and jump into it. Hoping to, that there's conversation, so again, feel free to stop or interrupt, or let's converse when there's questions. And also feel free, gonna try to be careful of the time and move through it pretty quickly. So I might even just say on any given slide, is there any questions about this project, just so we can keep the process moving along. So with that, trying to think, is there an easier way, Emily, do you know, to advance? Or just, maybe just scroll?
I thought in this program, if you go to view, I think you go to full screen.
This one?
Yeah.
Hey, thank you so much.
I think with the arrow key, we should be able to navigate, or with your mouse.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. Put the box. Okay, so just real quick, I wanted to one of the takeaways from last year's budget that stuck with me, that we tried to get a little further in the process is doing more long range look into the future for expenses and capital projects. Council Member Dixon mentioned that, and there was a little bit of that in 2025, but I think there's much more of that in this fiscal year budget 2026, and we hope to build upon that. So so there's some additional sheets in the very back of the budget memo that looks into future fiscal years, so feel free to refer to those. One of the things I want to work with Ryan and Amy about is looking into trying to project revenues and seeing how much revenue or fund balance that we have programmed into the future to meet some of those longer or multiple year projects. So the let's get to the very end. There we go. As it related to the budget kickoff, a few things that as way of a follow-up, we included the printed mail and newsletter within the budget, and that was discussed there. There was also discussion about Utopia and updates there relative to subscribers and to revenue, reoccurring revenue to meet the debt obligation. And Roger Timmerman, he's the executive director. He's planning on coming on May 21st. I think he's going to talk about those items, and I'll update the memo accordingly. But as you know, for this upcoming fiscal year, they're not planning on calling on any obligation from the city, so that nothing's been budgeted for that. There was a discussion about carports at City Hall, and so that is included in the budget as a project. And flock camera report on May 7th or the 21st. Lieutenant Ensley will be able to speak to that issue and just give some updates on that. One of the big conversations, or at least something that stuck with me, is Windsor Park and the completion of that. And so there's a proposal within this budget as well to push that project in earnest further. And so we'll talk about that as well. It's not intuitive to me. It's going to take a long time if I keep going forward and backwards, but
And something, John, real quick.
yeah.
So on that too, I got a call just a little bit ago on, means we're talking just real quick about a few things on here, but with the Westfield Longhorns, the graduating class. Have you guys driven through Roy and seen the signs up that they have for the seniors and stuff? Would you guys be willing to, as a council, be involved, to get involved with maybe participating in that, maybe financially? They ask about that. They have a meeting coming up this week on that, and so, but I would
Don't we
ask the
still
council.
have a council contingency budget?
Yeah.
That we could use.
Yeah, I think the more that we can do for the school, I think that's great. I think
Yeah.
make the community closer.
I like the way Roy does it too, and there's other high schools, obviously, there's Roy and Fremont, but they haven't come to us and asked us for anything. They have, and so I thought maybe we would at least participate in that, but does anyone have an
We have an
idea
idea of what
cost wise? I don't know, I think that they, you know, they're hoping to get as much, PTA is going to do some of the cost. So whatever we want to,
And
Yeah.
it's for signage that.
yeah, have you seen those in Roy before where they have the picture of the kids and stuff up and they kind of do individual signs for them on graduating class?
Is there
So-
sign ordinance say about that?
What's up?
Sign ordinance. We need to make an exception for.
Well,
School signage?
they've already called the city and talked to the city about where they can put signs
Okay.
at within the city. So I think they're going to be good about it, but, I just wanted to quickly get that out of the way. So what are you thinking for cost wise?
I have no idea how much it would cost.
I'm thinking anywhere between $500 or $1,000.
From the
Yeah.
contingency fund.
We're talking about the city council projects budget line item, it's not about 30,000 left in that.
We haven't
No,
spent
never
any of
yet.
it.
Yeah, so would you be okay with that or do you want to go a little more?
Yeah, I think
Whatever's needed is fine.
Okay. All right, I'll talk to him again, probably tomorrow, and then I can get back with you on that. But anyway, thanks for letting me just interrupt that because I want to make sure that got
Yeah. taken care
taken
of.
care of as well because it was a request that's coming up quick and they asked us about it. So,
Great.
hey, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm primarily gonna be the spokes person here, but I just want to let you know that department heads were heavily involved in the creation of the budget and the budget memo relative to narrative. So I think their voice is contained there, but again, ask questions because they're the ones who are gonna implement. And Amy Davies was really helpful in putting the budget together. I just wanted her to know how much I appreciate her help and assistance along with Ryan. And they're just a great support to the city. Speaking of implementation, I just wanted to briefly touch upon, and I'm not gonna go obviously project by project, but there's just a few slides that show what's been accomplished or will be accomplished by the end of this fiscal year. And these are great projects for the public. And so I think the outcomes are really, really provide value, but I also just want to recognize city staff for the work that they do in implementing the budget. It doesn't go unnoticed by me. In addition just to the ongoing projects, the day-to-day things that they need to do to keep the city running. And so, so here's just a snapshot of Parks and Recreation. Oops, here's one of engineering and all the road projects. I kind of broken down the projects by, projects that were bidded out, relative to preparing the bid, the construction management. These are big projects and a lot of good work has been accomplished or it will be accomplished by the end of this fiscal year. And then just some administrative, projects or tasks that came through the budgeting process. So the budget process and document, we don't need to spend a lot of time on this, but it does create a work plan as we just talked about. It provides information to the public. So, if any of your constituents ask, like hopefully there's information here that you can either provide to them or they can obtain. It creates a spending plan and spending limits. It also creates a savings plan, although this year there were no planned transfers out of the general fund to the capital project fund. That's not to say at the end of this fiscal year being 2026 that still might not happen, but nothing planned on the front end. As you know, we forecast revenues and expenses. It's an administrative record. It's really helpful for us to have a memo that helps us in the implementation process, and then the budgeting process itself creates an opportunity to provide some analysis. And there's been some good benefits that have come through that process, from reviewing garbage cans and doing an audit there to street lights, to making sure we update our road mileage, so we get as much B and C tax funds or C tax funds as we're eligible for. There's still things that we're working on in the administrative analysis to further understand how best to proceed or best to recommend. But these are all great outcomes, I think, from the process itself. So we'll launch into, these are items relative to all the different funds that you should be aware of. And there is a planned 1.5% COLA that's relative to US Bureau of Statistics, change in expense or I think expenses is probably the right word to say, from 2025 to January of 2026. So we look at that year period of time. Based upon the pay system that you created, there are potentially merit increases based on that structure. And then there's still some adjustments to be considered and implemented from the last fiscal year that we weren't able to do in one fiscal year. And so those are also planned. So here's that CPI that I talked about, and you can see the yellow line is the CPI in previous years. The blue line is what the city has done, and as of recent, you can see that we're matching the CPI. So one of the items that's proposed this year that has very minimal fiscal impact, but I think can add a lot of value, is an employee assistance program. And maybe you're aware of these types of programs from your own workplace. I've participated in an employee assistance program in other entities, and I've found it to be very beneficial. And as I've been here for a year, and I got to know some of the city staff, there are and we all do, these are all life circumstances that we have to, in seasons that occur in our life, whether it's a relationship or if it's stress, some stress is work related and some's just life related and personal life related. And so all these things, I think, occur to us from time to time. I've also used the EAP as part of a corrective action plan. And so anyways, what's being programmed into the budget is $3,400. That would essentially provide access for employees for this program. And it would be all the full time. So if we wanted to increase it, I think you could increase it a little further. Obviously, the cost would go up. It's essentially $11.40 employee per month. That would be the difference. So if it's something, again, that you would like to, I think we can make the benefit bigger without triggering any URS requirements. Sometimes when you provide what's called a benefit normally provided, it has unintended consequences and can trigger URS enrollment, Utah Retirement System enrollment. I think this is one of those benefits that they don't include in that. So if you wanted to do, yourself as city council members and have access to it, or if you wanted to include the part-time employees, there's opportunities there. So
How many part-time employees do we have?
well, we call them permanent part-time, and it's going to be Janessa and Maryland primarily. And then we also have one in Parks, two. Yeah, so there'd be 4. And I think it'd be there is some value beyond just the human side. I mean, from a work-related, people's personal life can be disruptive or interrupt work and productivity, and so that happens on for part-time employees just as well as for full-time employees.
So we're just talking about the $11.40 per employee times 4, is that?
Yeah, so an initial
That would be-
$44.
Yeah.
Yeah, I that would be awesome.
Yeah, I'd be all for extending it to the 4 permanent part-time employees. I think this is a great program and it would be a great addition for the benefits, so.
Great. Okay, we'll do that. I'll just confirm all that information I told you relative to URS, but I believe that's true. So here's just an overview of equipment replacement. Primarily, I think they're going to show up in the capital projects fund, but this is just a summary of what that looks like. There's a chart that you can refer to in the memo that showed you what we've done in different years. This one is a little bit, we've added some of the playground, which skews the chart a little bit. So if you're looking apples to apples, for example, this year we did a $340,000 playground equipment, which isn't necessarily, I don't think, included in last year's chart, but this year we included some of those playground equipment as equipment. So health insurance, this is always it's always something that's going to increase over time, so it seems. And the first renewal that we got was at 6.4%. our insurance broker went back and worked, with our current provider and got it down to 5.4%, which equates to about a $25,000 increase in premiums. I was thinking, we're in an insurance pool, and so it is a little different because it is based upon our claim history. Which sometimes if you're a smaller group, which we are, you know, you're pooled into a larger group under the Affordable Health Care Act, but that's not the case for us specifically. So they did say that a lot of premiums were going up much more steeply than our specific one, and I'm guessing it's based upon their claims. So all told, I feel pretty good about 5.4. I think they said trend was in that 9% range. Is that what you remember?
So Sean, there's no way to pool with other smaller cities, is there?
Well, we are sort of pooled, but it's PHP, public employee,
So it's already.
to some degree, but instead of pulling our claims history, I think that they look at our claims specifically. Is how I understood it and visited with, which is a little unusual. It's kind of like the trust where we're pulled together with all these different cities. So all these public employees are pulled together, but our renewal rate is based upon our actual claim history in a large degree. And sometimes, you know, if there's a bad year for the pool, we are all sort of, you know, realize that negative as well. But I feel pretty good that we're, as a pool, as our own organization, doing well as far as claims. So I think that speaks well of, I mean, obviously people need health care, we want them to get them, but it also, I think speaks well of people being careful about how they, you know, use that benefit. Because certainly you can use it in a way that can drive up rates. So I'm gonna actually have Amy and Ryan as needed explain these next few slides, although they're gonna reference, I believe, this paper that's in front of you, and it's relative to the different fund balances at the end of, maybe this is a good time to head off to you. I mean, you can talk them through it.
So this is a summary, 5-year summary. And then we focused on 2025. Make sure we are in compliance with the general fund restricted fund balance limitation of 35%. And then we also try to project into 2026. So as far as 2025 numbers, we projected year-end estimates based on actuals through March. We estimate we'll need to transfer out another 2.3 million. And the calculation on your sheet is actually the effect after that transfer out. So the grand total transferring out, let me just give you that number really quick. Reconcile these two sheets. Yeah, it'll be 2.29 million. In total, that will go out of the general fund to the capital projects fund in order to stay within that 35% limitation and to fund other projects. For 2026, as Sean mentioned, there is currently no budget anticipated to be transferred out of capital, all spent within the different line items. So you'll be within that limitation there. So then the grand total, when you've got the next slide, kind of show that, we'll go back and tell you kind of what the estimated fund balance at year end will be 2.9 million in 2025 and very close in 2026. So we target 30% to give us the original. Any questions there on the general fund? So capital projects fund is a little more complicated.
And I was just trying to put it into relative terms because I'm thinking our budget is close to 10 million, so that's about a 3-month. Is that a good way to sort of think about it? Which is helpful because taxes don't come in all at the end of the fiscal year, so you need money to sort of help with cash flows. But anyways, about 3 months of operating revenue.
Yeah, that's a way to look at it.
Yeah.
Capital projects fund gets a little more complicated just because of the different restrictions that we're required to only spend in certain ways. So we track the incoming revenues and expenses of your Class C, your park impact, your road impact fees, and your transportation tax. And to the far left, we also have that assigned fund balance that was kind of the residual of ARPA funds that was assigned by the council to be spent in Class C. So at the end of 2025, we're projected to see some pretty healthy positive balances. You can see within each restricted class where they would end up. And then by the end of 2026, we projected to use the assigned fund balance. I think it's for the Windsor Park, probably get into that later. Class C, you'll have 2.8 million. Park impact fees are estimated. It shows a negative number here. It will show a 0 on your financial statements, but that just means those will all be spent. And any revenues that are collected in the future will go against that negative fund balance. Road impact fees, you'll have 5 million, transportation tax, 2 million. And your total restricted.
Amy, I have a question.
Yeah.
So on the ARPA funds, you're showing that under the road, Class C roads? Is that what you just said?
No, it's assignment by the council, so we've got it in an assigned.
Just thought we assigned it out to
Yeah.
the sheriff's department.
Yeah, that we spend on the sheriff's.
You did spend it there against ARPA funds, but then it ended up in an excess in the general fund, so we transferred that excess to the capital projects fund.
I was confused.
So the money's not bound by the ARPA money.
No, the ARPA's
Okay,
been
good.
all spent.
Are we are done with all of
Yes.
that
Yeah.
funding? We're good. We spent it all.
Yeah.
Even,
Okay.
Spent it.
we lovingly call it ARPA funds, just because that's what sort of gave
Yeah.
us that surplus, that,
Thank you.
So what did we spend it on then, exactly?
The police, ARPA
Sure.
funds
So,
specifically?
yeah, so we put it in that fund, but is it actually spent or holding? there?
No, it's being held, right?
So
now.
Okay.
The actual ARPA money was received and then spent on the Weaver County Sheriff contract. But because the contract was normally spent with West Haven City money, it really freed up all of that extra West Haven City money.
Money
But
So it
otherwise
really
it's
was,
budgeted
for
it really
yeah.
was spent though, I think it's
Yeah,
the mayor's
Right,
question.
yes.
Yeah,
But then
so
the city decided to save equivalent amount in the capital projects.
Got it.
that's what I was just trying to clarify, because I wanted to make sure, because we still have project and funds that we could use, but we budgeted for all those, but we kind of set it in front of it then.
That's right.
Okay.
it has been designated, as you recall, when you made that transfer, you assigned 1.7 million. And assignment is important in this case because it's a restriction that you put on that fund so that you can decide how best to use it in the future. And so those funds cannot be spent without your explicit authorization to release them for whatever purpose you deem. And so that's why they're in this category. And correct me if I misspoke on that. But it is being proposed in this fiscal year based upon what was discussed, or the sense that I got from the city council relative to the Windsor Park initiative and trying to get that further along, to propose expending those funds for that purpose. And of course, that's for you to decide if that's how you want to spend them or not. We also have other funds that we can use if you want to, keep that money still as assigned and use it in a different way. But and maybe we could just clarify real quickly this impact fee issue, because we are, and I think this is reflective, and again, correct me, Ryan or Amy if I'm wrong, but what we were doing by showing the use of ARPA funds, we were showing the advanced spending of impact fees such that we were spending more than we've collected, because essentially, the Windsor Park is an impact fee eligible project that we can essentially recoup for impact fees. We show that the city essentially made a contribution above the existing level of service that we currently have. And by doing so, that could potentially raise the amount of impact fees that we collect in the future to recapture it. But it's shown, you know, through this, accounting system as a negative number. That's good, that's accurate. So,
And I apologize. So your revenues and expenses projected are correct on that screen, but the ending balances, we're gonna need to refer to this printout. So. Anyway, I think I've changed the formulas after I sent it to Sean. So the ending fund balance is just referred to the white. We've only got a -92 projected for the park impact. A little bit more in roads. So our total restricted fund balance and the capital projects will be 11 million. And the unrestricted is projected at 7.
you know, as we continue through this approval process or consideration, again, the assigned, you'll have to, if you decide that you want to appropriate those funds for that specific purpose of Windsor Park, then in a resolution that approves their ordinance, I should say, it'll have that explicit language that you're releasing and authorizing the use of the assigned funds for that purpose. Otherwise, what you'll see on the balance sheet is just that classification and reservation for those funds.
0.7 doesn't count against our 35%, does it?
That's only in the general.
Just the general
fund.
fund, okay, good. You can
Yeah, that doesn't.
store that on.
Did the council intend, you think, for a majority of that funding to be used for Windsor Park? I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
Personally, I think it's a good idea. I think it's kind of long overdue, so I like it.
I agree with you. Just want to make sure that the funding that we have set aside for that, you know, what, if we have anything else that, you know, is more pertinent or something we need to apply it for, but.
You do still have 15 million in the unrestricted that you can appropriate. You know, and part of the thought process, at least as I thought through it, you know, the ARPA funds was federal funds that were passed down to the state, to the cities, and you know, potentially there's the thought process that future generations might have to pay for that at some point. You know, considering our national deficit. And so the thought in my mind was trying to give some value for future generations. And I think that sort of helps prevents a generational project that, you know, that future generations will enjoy for years to come.
I think that crossing off Windsor Park and getting that done and then moving forward, I think that's a great idea. That's set out there for a long time. So.
Okay, so one of the other things, this is something good to get some direction from the council on, is the purchase of property. This is for the 12 acres between the city and the district. The final price is coming in at this $3,027,000. It's for 12.2 acres, 4 acres of 4 shares of an irrigation canal company. So if we just split it 50%, you know, our portion would be 1.5 million. And talking with Amy, and you know, we felt like there was some unrestricted cash that we could use for that purchase. And so the budget that's being proposed is built upon the fact that there is no, you know, debt service payment made to the district. The district isn't funding. We just, in fiscal year 25, we each pay, you know, our portion of the cost of that land. In fiscal year 26, there is $40,000 that's being allocated or proposed for design costs. So that design cost is supposed to help us. And I don't know if I selected that number. I don't know if I have a good estimate on what that cost would be. But the hope is that we can engage a design professional to help us understand what the future costs might look like and start to plan accordingly, and help us sort of map out what our needs are. And so
Are we still thinking we're gonna do both buildings together versus a separate?
You know, what we would propose, or at least our thought process right now, would be that we would have one building. We'll have to figure out how the ownership works, you know, whether it's condominiumized or some structure, but we feel like there's value in having one building, so some of these common amenities that we all need, like restrooms, meeting rooms, you know, kitchens, break rooms, you know, we're not duplicating those, and there's efficiencies, not only in the capital costs, but also the operation and maintenance. And so I think it, you know, functionally, it's better, I think, if they're in the same space, because on a practical level, they really pull and work well together, and so they pull their employees. So even though, as you know, they're sewer, people in this work and assigned specifically sewer, they'll help out doing projects in the parks, will help out public works, and so it works well together for everyone to be in the same building. There might be some outbuildings relative to storage or fabrication space, you know, might be decided that those are detached into, to that fact, I think John's kind of contemplated, John Wallace, you know, the district might have needs and might want to move quicker than the city relative to constructing, space in order for them to be able to buy equipment and store. And so the thought is that maybe the first phase, as we plan it out and get to the design, moving forward, we actually do one of the outbuildings first that allows and accommodates the ability for the district operationally to purchase the equipment they need to, you know, to start doing more things in the house. And I thought that was a great proposal and thought, because, you know, we want to move together at the same time as our resources allow us to do it, and allows them to
At
sort
some
of
point
move forward.
to move forward on this project and talking with John, there needs to be an agreement, you know, what portion, which entity is paying, so that costs can be allocated and estimated. You know, we're looking
Thank you on
forward to
that.
happening
Yeah,
sooner than later, but
we do need to
I
do
know you're
that.
working more closely with John as well.
Is this an opportunity, good or bad, for a time to bond, to do some bonding?
So I think from the district's perspective, they will probably have to bond for their portion. If it was 50-50, they would have to bond their portion of the building. I think the city would have to look at, I think the total cost is kind of up in the air. I think you've got a $3 million number there, but then we could present you with some different scenarios on the impacts of your fund balance on, you know, bonding or paying a portion, maybe having the district bond for it all, and then you pay for a portion of that versus using some of your impact fees or fund balance to pay outright.
I just wonder, we don't have any bonds within the city, the district does, that are zero interest. But, you know, about every city bonds for something and it's building something, but, you know, between the possibility of a police force someday versus, you know, building this type of building, those are some big expenses, you know, to start putting some things together. So I think just as a review, that might be something when we do start putting numbers together, you know, what the city, because this is directly, obviously, the cities and the district will do what they need to do. But, yeah, if we start putting numbers together, we may want to look at bonding as some type of a situation that would work for us.
Yeah,
Especially, I think, with rates right now, with, them being, you know, questionable on some things.
So would that be for the construction of the building and the bonding, but not the purchase of land, right?
Right. No, and I think too, you know, we don't have a bond rating as a city really, because we haven't done it.
Yeah.
At this point, so, I don't know what kind of, I know, like, the sewer district, Weaver Sewer District is looking at around a 4.36%, I think, for their bond for 30 million. But, you know, they're a AAA rated company, so I don't know how it would be for us to start out or where we would be at to look at that.
And we have to go to a rating company like S&P or somebody like that. Give a rating to the city.
situation, is it
consideration.
possible for the district, or for the district to bond for the whole amount and then getting reimbursed on the district? That's also another route.
Well, I think John acts like he wants to try and move quicker on this, so. And the other part of it too is just as a real quick side, I don't want to take too much time, but the district is maybe looking to try and see if they can get a hold of a back truck. And that's a big issue for the cities typically, and he's anxious to get a hold of something like that that would save them a lot of money versus, hiring that out. So it would make a big difference, but they need a place to store it. They're not gonna buy one and have it sit out. So I think there's some big purchases and big changes within the city all the way around and the district that would be kind of forcing us to look at these options and see what we could do out there.
So, so moving forward relative to this sort of fiscal year 25, the plan would be to amend the budget at the very end of the year to include whatever portion is ours, presumably this 1.5 million to purchase the property, and unless there's thoughts to the contrary, and then again this fiscal year 26 proposes some money to help further the process, determining costs and construction.
Is the council happy with this land purchase?
I think it's a good idea.
Okay. I'll tell you, it was a really good deal, to be honest with you. Looking at some of the other projects and things that are out there, the land value was actually, seems excessive, which it seems it is, but it was a really good, I think, situation.
Does this free up space in the other building as the sewer moves out in the shops, or where are they right now, the sewer?
Sewer functions primarily out of 40,
Okay.
around 4,000. But yeah, with a couple of changes. I mean, how far are we go? I mean, realistically, if we go and we do that, what we'd probably do is our current situation right now, we would probably turn more into the recreation house. And then possibly even, look at the shop portion as our maintenance area for vehicle maintenance, just get this set up for that. And then move bulk of the other operations to kind of move into the newer facility there. So that would provide ample space for recreation, a little overflow for parks and public works. And then obviously take care of the issues of the spacing and offices and conference rooms for, for what we currently have. Yeah. So.
Yeah, okay, absolutely. Did you touch on the stormwater? Okay.
Yeah, so. The kind of paper isn't too far off from our estimates here, but, we've got our investment in fixed assets. It's basically, your book value of your assets right now. Tax balance, which is estimated to be 1.1 million. 1 million. The restricted fund balance is a little bit higher of an estimate in 2025, and that actually is dependent on grant money received through WACOG, and that kind of depends on how much is expended. So we have projected amounts from Gardner, but they can fluctuate depending on the progress of projects. But through 2026, we have estimated about $300,000 of unrestricted, which is not a lot of work, not a lot to work with. I don't know if we could estimate a positive balance in 2027. I mean, costs, we'll look at it. I don't know if we're going to look at the stormwater fund in detail. But we are budgeted an operating loss. So the items that are bringing you to a positive balance are your impact fees, other non-operating items, when the service fees should really pay for costs.
And this budget as it currently stands, envisions appropriating $700,000 from from the reserves to go towards operational costs. There's several projects that we could talk to that's sort of driving it, but as you know, we're in the midst of, part of this budgeting process and analysis was to help us understand what those expenses were, not only for this year, but future years, so we can work with our financial consultant and we can, or they can essentially estimate a utility fee that is gonna meet the needs for the next 5 years. So
hence we don't have a net income listed there. But we don't know what our potential net income is yet.
We have a potential net operating loss of,
700,000.
600. yeah.
But for 26, it doesn't have anything in the column down.
Where that little red button is,
Yep.
that really should be the sum total of the 540,000 of revenue and the 1,245,000 in expenses. So it's about 700,000. loss.
you've known this is sometime, I'm not sure when the last utility fee was changed. Back, I think, maybe the decades. So it's been,
Never been changed.
I think it's the original.
Yeah, I think
That's what it is. It's always been
I don't
$3.
think it's changed at all.
well, it's
Decade.
showing
There
through
you go.
signs.
Been good to last.
Yeah. Inflation's finally won.
People would rather pay extra on their Comcast bill than their storm drain.
Yeah. We could combine them.
Well, I'm trying to pick up the pace here. How's everyone doing? And feel free to, get up and walk around or grab some snacks. There's certainly plenty there. So, this is just to give you a quick overview, in graphic form. This is revenues, and you can see it's pretty much the same revenues. There's a little bit of growth in charge for services, which I believe is really attributed to garbage fees. As you know, we increased the rates. Taxes, this is sales taxes, as you primarily know, that has grown, and we're projecting a mild or modest increase there of, I think, 6%. And you can see this the sales tax graph of historical along with the trend line and what we're budgeting, which is a little under what the historical or what the trend line would suggest. And it's a pretty good fit of this trend line to the historical data at 9.8. Could be a little stronger, but anyways, all told, we're budgeting essentially about a 5 or 6% increase in sales tax, and we feel like that's a good place to be. This is that essentially what I explained. For building permits,
Sean, can you?
Yeah.
Explain the other governmental revenues to me.
Oh, yeah.
Slide 31.
glad you mentioned it, and I'm just trying to see, that's relative to grants. This is ramp and,
So we kind of anticipate that going down quite a bit.
well, this is, so the orange was last year, so we actually are anticipating and have commitments for grants this year.
Blue was last year.
It's the other way.
Oh, maybe I flipped it then.
Yeah, I don't think we received any last year.
Yeah,
Oh,
must have flipped.
so we just got the colors.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Oh, you're good.
So,
Well, that's great. then.
yeah, this is this year.
I don't need to worry about that.
It's going in the right direction.
You guys all seen that commercial where it's turned the sign up the other way when it's going down, and so, there we go, much better.
Building permits, you can see the building activity over the calendar years. This is showing calendar years. And for this fiscal year, we essentially took the average of the last 2 years to come up with 16 single-family detached, 134 townhomes is what we're basing all growth-related revenues off from. And so this, this doesn't include a commercial, like if a commercial building came in, it like Walmart, for example, that could change this this revenue, but we're just basing it off from, in part, basing it off from impact fees as well. So those two revenue sources.
Can I just ask real quick on that? So when looking at these numbers the other day, I was looking at them going, okay. But we get a lot of approvals, but maybe not bills. Does this reflect, I mean, does it have anything in here on what our potentials are for what we have in
Recorded
impact
lots.
fees? Yeah, recorded lots.
I don't know if, do you know,
I
do you
don't
track that?
have that number, but that is something we can do a little research on, figure it out. I know our overall trend over the last several years, you look at been dropping total number of permits for the last couple of years from our high in 2020.
2021 seems to be the highest, but overall, yeah, I just was curious where we stood with that because
At that point, Mayor, there's not a lot of unfinished phases in all the major subdivisions at this point. We're in phase 3 and 4 and most of the ones that are previously approved.
yeah, except for some of the ones like Westwood, some of those that we get
Yeah,
closer.
they're already, but they're approved after their last 2 phases, but the Green Farm, the Parkway, Fairhaven, the Meadows, a lot of them are all in their last phases.
I think it would be interesting to the council, wouldn't it, to know about where we stand with that, Stephen, if you get a chance maybe to look at that.
Yes, that is something I can definitely look at.
Maybe just to give us an idea, because with the legislation, we're actually starting some communication with legislators for next year's session. So I'd like to kind of maybe try and have some talking points on that a little bit, because they're still, obviously pushing to do what they can, but
What's the term for that? Where they're zoned for a certain density, you can expect how many dwellings you're gonna go in?
So I think there are a couple different ways we can look at, because we have a lot of undeveloped property that doesn't have any entitlements to it. And so there is some development potential on those lots, which you could do a basic calculation of what the overall density is and what you're likely to get if they were to develop max out. But then you can also look at what has been entitled already through the approval process. So how many vacant lots are out there essentially that have already been approved to either be recorded or have been recorded, just haven't been developed. So we could probably, during our general plan process, we'll definitely look at development potential overall. But we can look and see what's entitled and what hasn't been built. It's a good starting place.
I like this slide. Thanks for putting that together.
Yeah, so I think Saratoga Springs had those kind of calculations at the last ULCT. They talked about if we were to develop every parcel in their city, right, going into this is how many, future homes there could be, or townhomes or apartments depending on the zoning. And I think that's the kind of data that we're trying to understand is what is the maximum build out based upon the zoning today?
Yeah, that's something we can look at. That's actually a fairly easy calculation.
And so I think the county did some of that and went through and figured that our build out would be right close to the 60,000 range. So we would be the second largest city in Weaver County.
It's not gonna take us very long to surpass Roy. They're built out, so as we grow, we're gonna hit that in it's.
Not a trophy I want to hang on the wall, but
I know, just saying.
it's crazy how fast it is growing, but yeah, that's just something that'll give you an idea.
So you're looking for what's already been permitted but hasn't been built as well, so that you can say, hey, look, this is.
Yeah,
Already.
it's a huge talking point
Right.
at the Hill, for them to find out what that is. Other cities try and get that number put together because like Ken said, they're built out. So they're trying to figure out how, and of course, the governor just came back with the 200,000 homes. I don't know where that came from, but went from 35,000 up to 200,000. So now they're trying to figure out where we can put those homes, and that's not something that we're already a little imbalanced, as you can see on here, with even single and multi-families.
Well, that just shows us how important zoning is. I mean, we need to make sure that we are zoned properly so that we don't have, 6,000 units of apartments in West Haven. So it's based on what the zoning currently is as you project build out.
Yeah, but Yes, so you can actually do it a couple different ways. You can look at what your current zoning is. You can also look at what your future land use map is, because sometimes there are differences. Like there's sections of town right now that are zoned as A2, but our master plan is R2, so you potentially see twice the density on those,
It
in
makes
those
more
areas.
sense to use that, because if we're looking at the potential, that's the potential.
Yeah, that's probably what, normally when I've done that type of projection, that's what we'll look at, is what the general plan recommends.
That makes more sense.
Sorry, back to the budget.
No, that's good. This is the kind of conversation.
You can move us along, Sean.
It's a good time to ask these kinds of questions.
What happens when you pass sugar around?
The barn rental, it surprises me at how much it is renting and what kind of revenue we're seeing. And as you know, in an upcoming, council meeting, there's a public hearing relative to fees. And so I just wanted to give you the most recent up-to-date information we have, which, these are based upon the projected is obviously future months, and these are based on existing reservations. So, you know, we're still learning the pattern of usage, but overall it just keeps growing.
June is wedding month. Got all those weddings coming in.
So we can talk more about it, in the upcoming, council meeting that we have on May 7th. These were the.
How's it going as far as the access and all that, Brock? I know there's some
For a minute, there,
little kinks.
yeah,
There was
for a
one this
minute there
last
was,
weekend
but I
even.
think it's been ironed out for the most part. We haven't had a call on that in,
You did on Friday.
we had one on Friday?
Yeah, you definitely had one on Friday, because someone contacted me and then they got a hold of Tyler. They forgot to pick up the key. They forgot to pick the key up. They didn't know that we were closed on Friday, so they didn't pick the key up Thursday. So you had to call on Friday.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's on them, that's not on the city.
No, well, if they didn't know the city closed,
It's on all the information they're given them.
We do
Is
try
it
to
is?
call on
Oh.
Thursdays and
Yeah.
Oh,
Reach out to
okay.
to say, hey, please come get out.
Yeah, we just need to put a key under the rock.
That's the.
Yeah.
It's under the mat.
Put that in the budget, a hide a key.
It's going pretty well.
Good.
It's going pretty well.
It's a nice facility. These are just the grants we talked about. Stephen, I think is like second week. I can't remember how long you've been here.
Yeah, I think it's the first or second week.
Yeah. Anyways, he pulled a rabbit out of his hat and got us 50,000 in short order for our.
One good way to start your employment here.
So, yeah, ramp grants, you know, about 18,000. So, the expenses, and this is where things changed a little bit from previous fiscal year. There are some expenses, primarily in public safety as it relates to, the sheriff and law enforcement. So that contract is increasing by, I think, 380,000, kind of roughly. There's additional slides that will be specific, so maybe I'll hold the numbers until we actually see the slides. There is currently right now within a budget, in this budget program, an additional employee for roads, and John and I are still working through that. But I plugged in the budget so I could see what that would do to the overall budget. But we'll have a little bit more analysis, in the future. Certainly some discussions around that. So here's a summary, from fiscal year 25 to 26. Elections is this year that will experience 30,000. I mentioned 384 for law enforcement, 34 for the shelter side more specifically. There might have been a marginal increase in the animal control portion, primarily I think to shelter.
Now, in elections, if we are required to have a primary, is that including that? I know it's less if we don't have to have a primary, so that includes maybe having to have a primary.
It does.
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. Good distinction. I think actually budget, I showed 30 here, but I think I actually budgeted 32, or 34 just for mailing. So. Anyways, yeah, so those are just some of the changes that I would point to. And I mentioned the additional public works employee that's currently within the budget. There's also new crossing guard, as you know, at about $7,100. I think we all knew this was coming. As you know, the city council, adopted a letter of support relative to trying to address wages, and the explanation that we got was essentially kind of attributed to retention pay. There was also an additional new to school resource officers, as well as a lieutenant position for school security, which I think was related to a Utah code requirement that
Yeah.
changed. Yeah.
So the school district pays for those resource officers, it's not the contract cities.
I'm not sure about that. Is that what you understand?
That's how I understand it, yeah.
Okay.
We'll have to clarify. We got a meeting tomorrow night, but we'll clarify that.
But even if the school district doesn't, shouldn't the county pay for that? Schools in the county? Why is that our job?
We
It's a
pay
good
the
question for the, I guess, the legislators. I don't
The
know.
ones in our city, that's what they're asking.
Four-part retention incentive, $5 an hour. They anticipate these are going to be the costs going forward. They're not going to decrease, I guess is one of the takeaways from the slide. And then animal control, I think we've talked about it previously relative to shelter and save them change.
Sorry.
It's not big enough. How many dogs did you just get recently?
153, I think is what it was.
Something crazy. That's a lot of
152.
dogs, right?
That's a lot to keep alive.
I'm gonna move on.
Yeah. I think so.
Re-election.
Maybe not.
The public defender case, though, I just thought this was interesting, and it does tell a little bit of a story that I thought was worth a slide, which is public defender indigent cases that are assigned by the judge to a public defender because of their economic circumstances and their right to have a fair trial. You can just see there's been some big jumps in the last couple of years. So.
Is it's difficult to find public defenders?
Well, yeah, so what I should probably maybe take a slower run at this. This is the judge, based on the defendant's abilities to pay. They've determined that they need a court-appointed public defender. So this would be the city paying for their public defense under the right to have a fair and equal trial and fair representation. And so these are more indigent individuals who are getting public assistance relative to their case in court or
So
representation.
it's just an increase in the number of cases.
Yeah, the people who are eligible or the judge feels like need public defense. So, from my perspective, it kind of tells a story that potentially there's more. I mean, those cases, maybe more recognition of the individuals who need financial assistance. Which was kind of interesting because there was an email that Nina shared with me and the mayor relative to kind of turn me on to maybe the need for individuals or children receiving reduced lunch or free lunch. And I was a little surprised at one of the numbers, so I try to reach out and understand that a little better. It's just nice to know sort of the needs of our residents relative to services, and that's what I think this is telling as it relates to justice court. And we talked about it in terms of recreation and the need potentially to help make sure children can grow and develop in a healthy way and have access to recreational opportunities. So,
Sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
One of the reasons for the lower numbers in 2021 and 22 was COVID,
Oh,
and they
good
weren't
point.
having court, they weren't holding court, so
That's a good
it's not that
observation.
we have a bunch more.
Everybody was
Offenders.
staying home.
Yeah, court kind of went into a holding pattern during those years. You're right. Very, very good.
Staying out of trouble.
This is just to let you know that this is a project that's gonna start this year. And, we'll go into next year and, Stephen's gonna be managing that, but that's also included. I didn't know exactly how much was gonna get done and how much billable hours would go against in fiscal year 25, so that's why you see it again in fiscal year 26.
Yeah, we're starting that next week and it's supposed to take like 6 months.
This is just the slide relative to the newsletter. So these next few projects we talked about in our budget kickoff. They were highlighted there. They are design projects for the landscape architect to help us design and implement these improvements in future fiscal years. So the idea is in this fiscal year, we do the design work, get a better understanding of the costs. But in subsequent fiscal years, they would be budgeted for construction. Of course, if these are things that you don't think are needed or you think the timing's not right, now's, even though the design would probably still be good going into the future, it's probably better just to wait and not move forward. But the cemetery, and this is relative to creating burial plots vertically rather than horizontally, and you can think about the space that it could save in the cemetery. And it is becoming a more popular option, I believe, relative to expense. It is a cheaper alternative, and I think it's becoming more acceptable throughout different religions. Essentially, I guess that's appropriate to say. I think the mindset is changing a little bit relative to that. So I think if we had this type of facility to offer, it might encourage that, which I think in turn would be a good thing for just extending the life of our cemetery and providing different options for people. So that's the reason why it's proposed. And I think a landscape architect could help make sure that we put it in a good location and think of all different kinds of considerations for implementation.
For all those dogs.
I was thinking about selling mine.
Offset some
over
costs,
my
take
plot
care of the dogs.
and doing the crematorium thing and then maybe just putting a tiny home on it. So,
Hey, Brock, currently right now, when someone's cremated, do they have to buy an entire plot or do we segregate?
Yeah, here they do. My in-laws were looking at being buried vertically, but they had to buy a big plot, so.
And we, made some adjustments to where people can maximize on that now and put multiple in. And some of the discussions that I've had with Sean is these, and then some people have kind of a crematory garden, where it's kind of a landscaped area where you have little spots all over in there, little tags or, small monuments that have names. And South Jordan Cemetery has a really, really unique one. So the idea of doing something like that at a cemetery could be beneficial too. We get asked about that stuff. We get asked about pet cemeteries, and we get asked about sections for cremation specifically. So. Awesome.
So I could do a subdivision on my plot.
And just so that doesn't get too far out, right? We give them permits to bury. That's what they acquire from the city. Is no permit to bury. So it's not a subdivision per se.
But it could be.
Sorry.
Ordinance has changed.
Yeah.
Yeah, we actually sell the rights for burial. We own all of the land. They just purchase the rights for burial.
Yeah.
So no evictions. That was ending.
This is something that was contemplated when GBD, G Brown Designs looked at the country park, and from a maintenance issue, there's concerns about the sand migrating onto the courts and interrupting play, but compromising play and the courts themselves. And so the idea is that we would hire GBD to continue to give us the next iteration of what this might look like in terms of trying to implement. Brock did tell me that the sand volleyball has been a real popular amenity, so I think they'd look to replace it somewhere else. And so they're just not really that compatible.
Why can't we just do that quickly? Can't we just do that fairly quickly?
Well, we could, but there's been some discussion about making sure that the overall design that's completed is something that everybody would like.
It's a big complaint, but we see a lot of people using it. So this needs to be moved away from the courts.
You can almost see in that graphic what it does to the west courts. See what that sand starts to do.
Oh, yeah.
So. Ironically, the volleyball courts were not popular for 10 years, and now you drive by there at night when the park's about to close, and there's as many people on sand volleyball as there are on pickleball now. So it's very popular.
They also play loud
Do you have an
music.
idea where we want to do it?
I think you still retain it in the park. I think you can move it further west in the park, a little bit closer over towards Light Playground. I think there could be a claim to do some things over there, even, possibly even lights at some point in that area. But yeah, I think you'd shift it over there, like well away from it. I think that'll also help draw some of the,
This is
some of the noise off. of
Right now, is kind of wait till G Brown looks at everything.
Yeah, this is something we would say, because this is their original plan here on the left, and then we would submit that back to them and say, hey, we'd like to maybe look at this again and just kind of get it filled. Because this plan right here was just a scope that they did. If you zoom in on it, they have some pictures and some articles that are submitted with this, and it's like a fireplace and some furniture and whatnot. So it's kind of a unique gallery space, and I think that would be cool, but I think it has to be really, really well designed. And so we would try to get a little bit of their help as far as vegetation that surrounds that, and kind of shades that portion, and there's a few things I think that go into it, but I would welcome the idea to have somebody look at it. But to your point, Mayor, we could move the sand volleyball very, quickly, but to redesign this, I think that's something we'd want to maybe look at that a little bit more, so.
City Hall landscaping, just refresh there, using, again, landscape architect, along with the hardscape, which, is starting to show its age. It needs to be mitigated, because there's some hazards relative to that. So, this is, looking at our baseball field diamonds, and Brock is starting, the process, I think, in the next couple of weeks of removing the lip. And you can just see over time what happens is the way that they've been maintained and do based upon the soil types that we have and the equipment that we have, and maybe inexperienced operators. And this isn't uncommon. I don't want to make it sound like this is West Haven's issue alone. It's pretty common to see essentially these lips to occur where the dirt gets moved from the infield to the transition of the outfield. And so Brock has already made arrangements to get the lips addressed and to essentially make it level. But we think part of that solution is importing in specialized material called diamond dust, which will do a couple things. It'll help make those fields more playable after a rain event. So that's important. It requires less maintenance and less invasive maintenance, where we can, instead of using a nail drag, we can use a mat drag, and that will keep the soil in its place rather than moving it around. So that will help long-term maintenance. I think that there's less wind erosion that occurs with this type of material, but it is expensive. It is an investment. It's about $14,000 a field for that type of engineered material. And so to do all three fields at the sports park would be that $42,000.
Didn't our
Yeah,
fancy
thanks.
Ventrac tractor have a lip attachment or something like that? It just,
It has an edge attachment.
okay.
And so, which it was working really, really well. And if we do migrate, I think it's just gonna help us even more so. The machine that we did get is fantastic for what we're doing now. We're gonna do a little in-house irrigation project on these, so we can kind of keep hydrated the right way as well. The material that he's talking about is a little bit more of a pumice that comes in. This right here is the Staker Parsons ball diamond mix. Don't know if it's it is what it is, right? It's not triple play, which obviously the reason why they do triple play is it's extremely much more expensive even than the diamond does. It also serves a different purpose. You have to have that's why professional fields use things like triple play. just because, or Dura Edge, just because, it does require additional maintenance. The material that we're using, or that we're, been throwing into the budget to do is a material, again, like Sean said, we won't have need of going through and do major renovations on the field anymore. It's a slightly, apply every so often a little bit to it. If you start to see that, but without the wind erosion, it's really wind resistant. Speeds with the vent track is the biggest thing that's gonna help us out, because no longer do we do it with a four-wheeler or anything where it really kind of throws that material out. This is kind of controlled, and that machine that we have, you referenced, has the drag mat. It has a drag mat and it has a drag cage on it, and so both of those are really what we would focus in on trying to use. Pretty awesome material, actually. So there's a few in the area that are trying to migrate to it right now, just for cities, because it just has a much lower maintenance cost, and your playability is really, really impressive. So they use it a lot up in the Boise area in Oregon, just where they're very, very wet climates. They use this a lot just because it can hold a significant amount of moisture and still be playable. So, which that's where sometimes we run into, you probably ran into that a little bit when you get a wet year with, your team. We struggle to make it playable, but they withstand quite a bit of moisture, so it's pretty impressive. So,
Okay.
yeah.
What about, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, once you start this, then what's the, do you have to replace it or add to it or whatever you get?
So Phil Moxley is kind of the manager on this. He says he'll go to a field and he'll add a little bit, not obviously as much. It depends on how much you add in the very beginning. He recommends 3 to 4 inches. But he said, you don't have to go through. He says, I'll go through and add a little bit, maybe every 5 years. I'll add a little bit more to a field, just because as long as they're managing it the way you're supposed to, really retain most of your diamond. The other thing I like about the material that we're talking about is most of triple play, you want a crown, so the water rolls off. This you don't, you want it to be a flat surface, which makes us a little bit more user-friendly for the level of maintenance operators that we have. So, that should help us a bunch when it comes to that. And there's things you can put in, like the home plates, if you're familiar a little bit with baseball maintenance, like clay bricks. And that just, you implement those in there, your pitchers mount home plate, pitchers mount catchers, umpires, just so you don't drive down and people start pulling it back in. So, I've talked to a few places that use it. They love it. Ironically, when I was with him, I don't know if he set it up this way, but I was with him. He had a guy in Boise, a city. They were running a great big tournament. I think he had 7 fields. And he said the only 4 fields, they just had a huge storm come in, and the only 4 fields that were playable the next day for his tournament that had a bunch of teams was the 4 fields that he had in Diamond Dust. They had a Bloodplex. And he said the other fields were not playable for the tournament, but before they had it, were all playable. So, I made a few phone calls. I plan to meet late, like up in Bear Lake area. He's done a couple up in there, and so far from what they've told me, it's pretty fantastic. So that's kind of the goal, is to keep the fields looking super, super sharp without having the erosion that goes in, creates the lips and all of that. So I think we can kind of upscale baseball fields, hopefully for a longer period of time, keeping them looking really sharp. The goal is we have a lot of people that want to bring tournaments in. The gentleman over in the terrace, he wants to bring a tournament in the fall, and we thought, hey, if we do that, maybe we can start to rent our fields a little bit in times when we don't, try to accumulate a little bit of flow that way, to maximize on it. And he actually says that our field, surprisingly, they drive me crazy. I'm an old baseball guy, so the lips and things drive me crazy, but he says it's actually one of the better looking parks that he rehabilitates. So I feel good in that fact, and that's because you've allowed us to use things like Ulite and some of that to kind of help our soil, but we think we can kind of take it to a better level, make it a little bit nicer.
And what's that picture of up there now? Did you say? That's at the ballpark, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because I noticed the other day when we were there for baby farm animals that it had a huge, big, I mean, if the ball came up, it would jump 10 feet in the air. If it was a good grounder, it's really bad, so.
Yes.
But is that one of the cheaper things? I mean, is there something less that we could use that would still be a good
As far as
quality?
the lip removal, that's not a lip removal. The
No.
lip removal's
The soil.
yeah, honestly, at that level, it's the cheapest I've ever found. So when you go into that, you're looking at the stuff they have like in, most people mirror what you see, like you think of St. George, and that's what most people are doing. St. George universities like Utah, BYU, that when you really invest in a field, that's what they put into play. So Staker Parson was kind of that. But the mixture where it just has so much clay and it just gets so hard. So, but this stuff is, like I say, it's a little bit more of like a pumice almost, so it keeps it very, very playable, safe. And then we should be able to manage our lips, you know, really, really effectively. So,
A lot of money.
yeah.
We budgeted some funds for matching funds for a wall mural, and this is based on the idea that the beautification committee would like to propose in an upcoming grant to do a wall mural. And there's things, things still need to be decided and you know, where that location would be, but that's included in this year's budget. Obviously, if there wasn't a grant, then those funds would not be.
Tell us what you think that would cost overall.
Well, you
I
know,
guess it depends on the location, how big it is.
yeah, that's right. And to what level of detail, but I mean, I think, I worked for a city that did some murals and, you know, and that's been a few years ago and we were spending upwards of $20,000 for a wall mural. That was the last one that they did, I can really remember, was in COVID, and it was 25,000. And it was a really good professional muralist. He, I think, would actually go around the world and do those murals. We caught him during the COVID. So anyways, I think anywhere from 25 to 35, and that's again depending on the size and scale.
Saying the grant would cover it.
No, I think probably a 50-50, is that what grants typically do?
Yeah, you can submit it for that.
I did find out that grant has funded wall murals in the past, so it's not outside what they've typically done for cities.
So a water tank mural? Get back to that again?
I think that would be a little bit more than what's contemplated here, unless it's a really simplistic mural, you know, maybe like almost the city logo, but if you're really going, depends on the level of details. But I think that's obviously a great statement piece as you come into the city.
I heard Salter Signs would donate that or.
That's what I heard too.
That's what I
As
heard.
part of the campaign.
Sure.
Yeah.
We love dogs.
Bring the dogs.
Bumper stickers. Hockey, recreation. And Brock, actually, maybe I will let you speak on this one a bit.
Yeah, we're looking forward to starting up a hockey program. We think it's they've told us to mold it basically the same costs as the basketball program. And I mean, the short of it is I think it's going to be huge. Ryan Smith's kind of all in on the hockey scene in Utah, donating millions to try to build rinks, because obviously, you know, hockey, his level is ice, but ours is not. Ours is just on gym floor, so we already have that space. We've been running camps and clinics so far, and people are really liking it. It's getting a really good buzz. So they wanted to implement it sooner, but I told them hold off. Let's just kind of see how camps and clinics and see how it goes. But I think it's starting to move in a direction that's going to be very, very popular. So they're looking to try to run a league coming up. So they're going to mirror the costs of kind of our basketball program as the model, and pretty excited about it. The gear they get. That's actually what's kind of neat about it is the gear that we get to help facilitate the program is really, really impressive versus what you try to purchase that on your own. So, but yeah, we think it's going to be a very, very big program for us in the future. So.
I think this is exciting. I just think if it's similar to football, it's costs city quite a bit to.
Yeah, it won't be the same as football. Yeah,
Football is the equipment mostly, isn't it?
Yeah, football is just so expensive for all of that, but this is kind of a whole different methodology than football was. So we won't be buying thousands sticks and helmets and all that kind of stuff. So there's a package that they get that helps with that.
For the $60.
I'm sorry, come again?
I mean, it says registration $60.
Yeah.
So they'll get that package in.
It's the jersey stick, and you 2 Utah Hockey Club tickets,
Yeah.
entire package.
It's impressive. So our rep that manages the programs for the youth for the Jazz say that package right there is like over $150 that they're going to enable us to put within that, so it's gonna be good.
Most of it's the tickets.
Probably. So,
Crazy.
anyways. And our recreation department is fully ingrained with them and some of those things, so it's been pretty good.
So, these are, things we've talked about relative, they're in the budget, the land use element, partially funded by a grant, water use, preservation element, which, is actually gonna start, we believe, ahead of the land use plan, just because of the timing of the grant and the availability of those grant funds, which will be July, and we're gonna be funding this water use preservation element out of general funds, so we can start that early. Also amending the annexation plan, which was contemplated in this year's budget, but now that we've got staffing, and we've got a land use consultant, we're in a position to move that project forward. So all of those projects are budgeted into this fiscal year 26, along with just some funds available for general consultation from our land use consultant for ordinance updates and other projects. So the barn maintenance, there are some ongoing maintenance efforts, and to that degree, we've scheduled out a week to be able to go in and seal the concrete floors, stain the barn doors. That might happen earlier. Look at the interior concrete floors and the maintenance that needs to be done there. So some funds available for that. This is just the usage that kind of mirrors the revenues. Included in this upcoming budget is City Hall maintenance for parking lot. And that is 37,000, and it's to address, they're gonna put what they call overband, a mastic tape that'll help seal these cracks up. And also they're gonna put a slurry seal with an AP4. So they anticipate that this maintenance will add another 8 years of life. It is nearing 30 years, so keep in mind, I've heard that 30 years is a long life for asphalt, so maybe potentially after this maintenance, maybe we're looking at replacement of the asphalt some point in the near future. Solid waste tipping fees have increased, and there's a larger explanation within the budget memo if you want to reference that, or we could talk about it briefly. But it's essentially $2.24 per ton. What I anticipate the effect could be is about a $17,000 increase in just tipping fees. So capital projects, any questions on the general fund?
Restrooms at the barn, what were we doing there? Can't remember what we discussed.
Yeah, we did, and this is, we'll talk about in the capital projects.
Perfect, there we go.
Yeah, so it's a few projects in, I believe. Ramp grant, we talked about getting funding. This is the grant revenue for ramp grants that are budgeted in the capital projects. 110 for the playground at Windsor and 64 for the pavilion. The total project costs are more expensive because of the city's matching grant. We'll talk about that, but the Windsor Park playground, the total cost there is $223,000. The ramp's 110, with the city paying the balance of 112. And we can use impact fees for that project since it is a new playground facility and adding capacity. These are what's contemplated for the playground configuration, generally the pieces of equipment that we replaced.
And we'll be done, Rob.
Well, timing wise, I'm still waiting for playground parks and structures to get back with me on a couple of pieces to find out timeline, and we can have them in. And then we also kind of timing a little bit with our services and the curbing that has been taking place up there. I could probably get an update to, let's say, a couple of weeks.
And if we do decide, I would say, and just think about strategically, we may want to wait until we actually, if we're going to undertake a larger construction project, we may want to wait till we get further into it so that there's not conflict between people and children trying to enjoy the amenity and just the construction zone that could be occurring, with dirt, earthwork and ongoing construction vehicles. So just a thought on how best to proceed. The pavilion, it's gonna be a 35-foot hexagon shaped structure and 133 total. The city's portion would be $68,000. And stop me on any of these projects that you want to discuss, or certainly if you don't feel like these are projects we want to do or shouldn't do, this is a good time to sort of have that conversation and give direction to the city staff.
I think we agreed with these when we were talking about the ramp grants anyway, so.
Yeah, I think so too. And these are easy since we have a partner willing to invest in our city. So this is the Windsor Park. This is the earthwork irrigation planting trail disc golf. We're not really sure what 107 or 1.7 million, would do for this project. So we talked about, Brock had some good ideas relative to essentially maybe the city acting as the general contractor, getting bids, independently from different service providers to try to get the lowest cost. In some ways, Brock has identified some local vendors that he thinks would be interested in the project and can do some of these their specific trades in an economical way. So that's one thought about how we would proceed. So that would, if we go that approach, it will take a little bit more staff time and there'll be more construction management, but it might save on the overall budget. So I think for purposes of the budget, what you're contemplating doing is appropriating, a set amount of 1.7 and see how far we could go with the improvements.
I love the idea of doing it that way. I don't think it'll be that much more time because it's inspections and reviewing what they're doing and bids.
Yeah, I think we've got, like Sean said, I think we've got a couple of contractors, one farmer, and some irrigation companies. We've done multiple projects in the city that I think we can be pretty aggressive on a project like this. We all had sticker shock when we got the cost estimates, but
11 million?
yeah. I think we can do, it's definitely a big project. I mean, just in trees, I think we could spend tens of thousands just in trees, which I think would be good. Yeah, I think we can do a lot of this at a little better cost. If we those companies and go to bid and see how aggressive they can.
Do we have water on this property? I mean, what do we have on this?
So we need to, Weber Basin, let's see, did we start that, Emily? We were gonna submit to them to start the process to allocate water shares for Windsor. I don't think we talked about that in one of our engineering meetings. I don't think we've done that though, have we? Yeah, because I remember Ryan said that's our next step, but I don't think we have submitted anything specifically to Weber Basin yet. Have we submitted it? I know we talked about it, but I can't remember if we officially did it or not.
Well, we have to wait for that. No, we find a solution for the very first step.
Because once you start a process, you gotta have water, right?
Oh, yeah.
Some of this stuff, so that's why I'm just asking about it, because
Yeah.
it's gotta be the process that's gotta be going on now for sure.
This is that explanation of using those assigned funds for ARPA, or what we, in memory, called ARPA funds. The bucking shoots, I'm gonna try to go, because Brock needs to leave here in a few minutes, excuse him. But I think there's a few park projects, so I'm gonna try to go quickly just in case there's questions you can ask him before he needs to step away. But the idea with this budget proposal is that 6 bucking shoots would be replaced. They're nearly 30 years old. He's gone ahead and got the bids, and cheapest bucking shoots that we can buy that we would propose amounts to $65,000. And they're just, you can see some rust down here. They're just getting to a point where they're compromised, both the animal and rider safety.
Really? I mean, is that, I mean, we got some rust in the bottom of it, but that's $10,000 a shoot.
There's some of them that have holes in them. Our stock contractor said that if a bolt wanted to, they could bust through most of them. So they're just, they are down. I mean, we've rehabilitated a few times with them, but they're definitely worn down.
Locking mechanism, I think, is something that Brock has told me is essentially what's worn down and it's having a hard time.
So can we get grants for that?
Well,
I mean, at one time we talked about talking to Brefford about, you know, maybe put more equipment of theirs in the arena. Would they be interested in doing anything like that for advertising or?
we've gone through and checked, and we talked a little bit with Chase Heiner, who did this up at the county. The ones that Garrett feels the most confident in is actually Powder River, which these are Powder River, but they've made some design changes and they're more robust now. And so we were looking at doing the Powder River. The best cost we got in Powder River was at ordering through IFA. And so as he went through, and Garrett talked to him about trying to get as aggressive a pricing as we can, just based on the fact that it's a city facility and whatnot, and they're generally pretty good on that. That's kind of where it came back. The others are actually a fair amount more expensive, but so we think that Powder River would be the way to go for profit. So, grant, I mean, we could always, we could definitely always apply for a grant to see if we can try to get something going. I don't know if there's grants specific to arenas. I don't have that, but yeah.
The rock walls at Sports Park and Stonefield Park, these are what's existing, those are existing amenities, and this is what is being proposed to replace. They're about $15,000 a piece.
We get the restrooms fixed over there.
We got the structural engineer came, we're waiting for the report, and then from there we can, you know, work on getting the building permit process underway. This is a replacement of a turf tractor that's 18 years old, roughly, and we looked at some of the parts that are needed to be replaced. You know, it is a heavily relied upon piece of equipment that does, you know, fertilizing, the mowing, spraying. As the city continues to increase its land and parkland, you know, I guess most notably what's contemplated with Windsor Park, having a good piece of equipment that's reliable is important, so we can keep pace with the mowing schedule that needs to be done in order to essentially get all those fields mowed. So having downtime or eliminating downtime is important. So a new tractor would be $50,000.
How much is that one worth? 5,000. Is it diesel?
We have a couple Kubotas in the fleet.
So are we, on that, are we thinking about selling it and getting a new one, or fixing this and having it as a?
Well, I
It's
just,
not worth fixing if it's worth 5,000, but would take $10,000 to fix.
I think we would look to let it go and let it some code. The tractor still has some life in it, but maybe not the cost of what it would, you know, for us.
I just wondered if you were asking to do both.
No, I think we would just look to get the new one and send it down the road.
this was just shown for illustrative purposes of
How much it's gonna cost.
yeah, what's sort of wrong with it.
Seem like they're super high. Super high cost.
This is, well, maybe I should say, I can tell you offline, maybe, but, yeah. We did go to, an implement store and have them price it out. And it was just, I think, one, so we could shop around.
Actually, the hood is something that they would have to really, because they didn't make that hood for it anymore. So the hood was something that they had to really dig into.
So the idea with what's being proposed here is, we outfit all of the Kubotas with the ability to have a plow and sander. The one that's in the park right now is used during the summertime. There's a power washer that's in the back and it's used to clean out those restrooms. And so this would just give us another piece of equipment within the winter to use for pushing snow, and that's important as we start to gain a little bit more area that needs plows, whether it's the trails or areas around the school that we think there's gaps in people, moving snow for kids. So, 14,000 is what would cost for that outfit. Also, what's contemplated here is bringing an internet connection to the city parks, with the primary improvement initially being, although the recreation department would use it for their needs relative to accessing the network or data points or sportsman software. But it would be primarily used, at least initially, for security and security cameras. We've had some unfortunate events that have occurred within restrooms, and restrooms always seem to essentially need some monitoring and surveillance, whether it be vandalism. Recently, in the last year, someone was seriously hurt within a restroom, and we can talk about that. Maybe offline might be best. Or one of our restrooms were, at the subject of an accident and a wreck. And so having these types of video surveillance helps us to understand and helps us to address what issues need to, or to give the information over to the law enforcement. So it is costly to connect. Utopia, in order to do the connection, they will essentially fund that, but we would pay it back over time. And just like a homeowner would do, it essentially amounts to about $100,000 in internet connection costs. This is relative to the building of the fiber to the actual place of connection. Brock went out with them. And so we feel really good about these numbers, because we gave them GPS and they confirmed those GPS, and those are the numbers that they were saying it would cost to connect. So the way it would work, and maybe I'll let Amy or Ryan, mind if I hand over to you and talk about the accounting piece of this?
So in your governmental funds, you don't have long-term debt. But since this is kind of a infrastructure funded by long-term debt, in order to get it on the books, you have to budget an expense and a revenue equal to the entire cost of the project. So we would have $105,000 of revenue, $105,000 expense. Later on, it converts to debt in our government-wide statements, but just for this fund budget, those are two key components to know. And then we do have the $15,000 annual payment. So 105 would be in and out in 1 year, and then you would have $15,000 each year over.
I think it's a 7-year,
4 months.
4 months.
That's just to get it there, and then we have to buy cameras.
Yeah, the camera piece would be installation, hardware. I think it was pro edge 28,000 would be the cameras piece of it. And then there's the ongoing cost of internet. We'd get a wholesale connection, and going forward, this is something that Utopia doesn't advertise, but for cities, they'll essentially allow you to have a wholesale connection where your first connection is $500, but then for each circuit after that, it's $550 until you consume all that bandwidth. But so anyways, there's about $8,000 in monthly costs, not monthly costs, annual costs relative to the connection itself.
Does that go to our subscription percentage as well?
Yeah, so we'd be
Helping ourselves out.
Yeah. And this will allow us, there's a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot, but there are more and more smart city applications. You know, we've talked in the past, Brock and I, about a weather station and using, they can essentially detect lightning. That'll help us determine playability for recreation. So there's certain things we can continue to layer on top once we have the internet connection as technology continues to evolve. Sprinkling systems, controls that way, all kinds of good things that can happen once you have a connection there. Brian, this is the restroom piece that we talked about. We have explored so many different options, and in the end, I think we were maybe overcomplicating it, or maybe I was. And so what's being proposed is that we just continue forward with the existing plan, which is to build out the existing wood frame structure, the red building that was always contemplated for a bathroom. And the reason why we think this makes the most sense is the utilities are there, it's already stubbed. And so we would finish that out. Brock did get a bid on what the materials would be, and that was roughly 80,000. So, you know, for budgeting numbers, you know, we just doubled that for labor. Or use that same number for labor, and came up with a price of 166,000. We looked to build a storage on-site detached, obviously, and I just put as a budget number, not knowing any better, 75,000. We're thinking it's a 400 to 600 square foot storage building. We want to make sure that it's aesthetically pleasing and doesn't detract, you know, from the actual buildings that are there, and so we do think that's important. And so anyways, here's the buildings that everyone's familiar with. This was a contemplated layout of this red building as far as the build out of the restroom itself. We would look to add potentially another storage that was complementary. Either in these two locations made some sense to us. This area right here, there's quite a bit of topography that starts to change. There's a canal here, which anyways, it does slope off from the canal down into the park. So we felt like those two areas might be a good location for food storage. Yeah.
What were you anticipating square footage on the shed?
400 to 600 square feet. So roughly the same. I think this is, remember if this was, I think it was in the 400 range. I think numbers, but I think that's what I remember.
I think probably would have been quite a bit cheaper than that.
The 75. Playground border replacements, essentially, this is what we have in our existing parks. They've sort of lived their life, and we would replace it with, oops. Oh, I didn't show the replacement, but it'd be a concrete strip, 12 feet high. What was the 8 inches?
12 inch high, 6 inch width.
Used to retain the fall material. Total for these three parks, you can see Stonefield Sports Park and Holmes Park. The total amount would be $22,600.
What about the fence there? The fence at Holmes is pretty much toast. It's got holes in it.
I just approved the project to have the fence completely fixed. We're gonna go through the work on the park strip redesign.
Perfect.
And so, but the fence, I just approved to have that, I think on Thursday.
Right.
I approved that.
I keep getting questions about that.
Yeah. You don't like the pinwheel?
It's got purple flowers on it. I'm not sure where they came from, but.
This project is the covered parking stalls at City Hall. Ed, I should say, Ed was kind enough to reach out to Wingspan, and this is just for budgeting purposes. Came up with a number that they were essentially $1,300 a stall. It seemed really low to me for some reason in today's dollars in construction. So I doubled that price for budgeting purposes.
John?
I think it's still cheap. Maybe I just don't know the price is right. But anyways, it could be as low as 1,300. And but we have money to go up to, yeah, so I budgeted twice that. And this is what the wingspan, carports would be. So, and maybe, maybe 13 will get the job done. These are, 8 stalls. And the idea is that we would just, use them to cover some of the city vehicles and there might be capacity for future city vehicles and.
Just out there, is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, I think we need to find a place, and my idea, and again, we might use someone to help cite it relative to the solar exposure and make sure that we're sort of accomplishing what we need to. Maybe there's a place that's better, but also think these aren't the most attractive place, structures, so we might want to have them a little bit more hidden, so that might be a factor, but also accessibility. So there might be several different factors that play into it. I think my only concern relative to the project is just the maintenance. If we're approaching the end of life with our parking lot, we just want to make sure, I just don't know how maintenance occurs with asphalt under these structures. And maybe someone with a construction background, or maybe we just have a crane. These are bolted on, so it might be just as easy as just getting it lifted off or I don't know.
They
Maybe
can
someone has
work around it.
Okay.
They can use a compactor and just throw it underneath there.
Compact and
Yeah,
roll
so
it
you
that way.
don't have to get underneath it.
So not a lay down machine, just a roller and. Yeah. Anyways, so it's relatively inexpensive, I thought. I was expecting something to look more significantly costly.
Anything else on the budget?
Well, you could budget half that.
I like the 13 stalls, sounds normal.
I don't wanna, does that sound good to you? Like,
Yeah, I think it's there's not that much to it.
that's good. Let's do it then. We can budget at 13 a stall. I think I budgeted, how many stalls did I budget? Wait a minute, I should do math. I'll never do math in public. But I think I budgeted 16 stalls. Did the math work out that way? Okay. My memory's better than my math. Okay. Then do it.
Well, that's why I went with 3.
So it would be otherwise like 28. So I'll replace that number with this number. 20. We talked about this one already, architectural services. Yep. If there's anything to talk about on this project unless the council feels otherwise. So I'm gonna keep zooming by. The backhoe replacement is being proposed. It's 2014. It's having a hard time staying in neutral for some reason.
That could be.
Staying here, yeah. And so there's been quite a bit of work done to it. And I think I listed out that work if you want to take a look at the history as far as maintenance and repair, it's in the memo. The value, they did get some bids, estimates, and they're saying the trading value is 45. So the total cost is 137, deduct that, so it'd be about 95,000. And the district would pay 33% of that, with the city paying 66, so it'd be used for stormwater, it'd be used in parks, it'd be used in roads, and sewer. And we would enter into a maintenance agreement between the city and the district that would just define that capital asset and how we would treat it between the two entities as a shared asset.
Used it a lot on dumpster days. Pushing trash.
Yeah, it's an important piece of equipment. Oh, hey, there's the receipt repair. From 22 to 24, it's been about 17,000, and still, I guess, a little sketchy. This project is installing a transfer switch and docking station that would allow this building to have backup generator, using our mobile generator right now. Even though we have the generator, we can't essentially use it in this way. And so the cost to get the equipment and the labor would be 20,000 to make it available.
This again, read this one.
So this is our backup generator.
Right, and this is to plug in to hook it up so that it runs that public building?
Yeah.
And that's how much? 20 grand?
20 grand, yeah. 10,000, I think, was, the materials, the transfer switch and the docking station. And then the actual is, the labor to do the wiring and different things. Is, I guess, more complicated than. I do have a bid, so I could show it to you. You could probably make some sense out of it.
I was more than that thinking, as long as you have access to the power going into it. Yeah, it's just it's kind of a male to male plug that goes over to it.
It's the same, the transfer switch in the sub panel.
Yeah, that seems awful high to me.
And the transfer switch, and maybe everyone understands this, but my understanding is that essentially prevents electricity from being backfed into the grid, so it makes it safe for the linemen who are using restoring the power.
It's basically a sensor that detects the power coming in and out, can shut the off. So, but yeah, it'd be interesting. I can't believe it's quite that much, but
I'll send you the bids.
I have one at my house that we did.
We have multiple bids.
We have LWE provided for the labor, and then no, we don't have multiple bids. So just for budget numbers.
What would happen if that building was without power for a day?
That's, right now it's used as public works, so there's probably a little bit more of a higher priority, but in the future, if it evolves to recreation, it probably is not as critical, to have power. And so, you may or may not want to do that. In some ways, I feel like having backup generators and just making sure that there's operational, continuity is important, because that's what we need to do in case of an event. And so for that reason, I felt like it was warranted. And this was kind of contemplated before we even had on our radar the ability to build a new one, but that's still probably 3 to 4 years out, I would think. I'm not really sure how quick we're going to move on that.
Do we have like backup servers and computers and stuff in there that we need to have running in that short period of time the power's on?
No, I don't believe so. I think like SCADA and Emily might be able to add to this. I think everything's sort of here at the city offices. So I don't know that for sure. I need to verify, but it would certainly prevent anyone from accessing the network there.
I don't know how big that portable generator is either, so I don't even know how much amperage you're gonna get out of it. That would first be one.
Yeah, the other thing too is for $21,000, I'll bet you could put a Generac out there.
Well, you can get a household generator.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, they have commercial ones, Generac too, but that's not, that would be probably considered a household one, you know what I mean?
Probably
Cause you don't have, I don't think there's tons of power being used, but it would just convert it over just like a house because it's about the same size probably, but
And there's no heavy electrical loads.
I don't think so. I mean, a welder.
Emergency, they probably
The
not.
report says it's 125 kVA.
That's like household generators. Okay, there's no-
We could dig into this, and you could certainly put this on the shelf for a future year.
I would like to, I just don't think that's worth the money for that particular building.
Okay.
If there's not any, I mean, worst thing, they might go home for the day because they can't get inside, I don't understand.
I think
Microwave
it's
oven.
Well, like, how?
But if you're
I
looking
think-
at it, if you're looking at it in long term, a bigger sense of an emergency citywide, and
Well,
you have
isn't that what we bought that generator for, is so we could use it in an emergency, so wouldn't it be used somewhere else in an emergency with no power?
Well, I would say, and I don't disagree that maybe we should take this out, and maybe this is, the timing's not right, but I would say Public Works, if there's an emergency, that's sort of a main, area of operation and restoration and realizing we don't have the same utilities as maybe other public works departments, but you know, like in a snow event, this is where the crews are coming back to restock or rest for a moment or doing all kinds of things, which is frankly a likely maybe emergency event, you know, a large snowstorm. So I too think making sure that the public works, can operate is really important. And I think that's just the expectation of the public and so that's in part some of my thought process behind it. It's hard to sort of explain to the public, well, we don't have power at the facility. So it's more for emergency events and episodes, more so than just, you know, a power pole was taken out and it's just, you know, the guys can go home and no one else is affected by the event.
I kind of agree, Councilmember Schwab, on that. I think the trailer, like for example, you know, if we do have an emergency like a earthquake or something, and something gets disrupted, power lines, we're gonna need, you know, sewer pumps. A backup on those. If we don't have that on, that we could rotate around or move from side to side. If you're gonna do something, I would put more permanent power, you know, generator on that building somehow to where
That's what
it just flips.
the district had relied on portable generators for some of the pump stations, and they're all going now to permanent.
I think it's a good idea. I think it's a lot
It probably
cheaper.
was done as part of the emergency planning process, where this had come up, but,
And they do have,
you can get a household size generator from it, probably more effective than one.
We could have a 500-watt generator, and a couple of light poles for an emergency situation, so they have lights and get around them. You can call RMP and you can give them the address and the parcel number, and they'll give you all of the times their power's been out, historical data.
Yeah.
And you'll understand the ROI on it.
Yeah.
I just think that's extreme.
These are all good thoughts.
I think I'd leave that to be portable for the needs of the city in different things, because I think you're gonna run into some where they do have those power generators on there, but they can go down. That's what, we need something like that to get around, but I know they use that, for example, like for West Haven Days. And then the connection on that building, if that's important to have that power, that's what I would probably look into that, because I don't think it's gonna be not that much to have it set up.
I'll take this out of the budget. Sounds like, you know, the timing's not right and maybe it's not the right project. So
I think we could look into it, let's just maybe look at some alternatives.
Okay.
To it, maybe, get something done, because it just depends, if you already got it in there and it's going to balance out and work all right with the city, we could still come up with a way to do that. There's other, I mean, like I would have, like on my home, I have a generator that I can just do 2 male plugs into the system, but I don't have the conversion switch to it, so I have to manually do that. So if the power came back on, that's the only thing I have is a breaker to stop that, but to not overload, but that's why mine was a lot less of that, but those are some things that I think for that building, for the size and for what the usage is, I think it's probably get something quite a bit less that would work well for that. And then something you could, on it.
great feedback. There's some money proposed in the budget, 150,000 just for acquisition right away for non-WACOG projects. This is a new line item and a new concept. So again, this might be something that you want to include for the budget or maybe don't. But there's certain times, you know, through the development application process. So when the city's reviewing and approving an application, in some sort of circumstances, we can require developers to dedicate right of way. And in some cases, it's outside of the legal ability to meet those standards. And so it's all really based upon an analysis of rough proportionality of the impact of the development. And so this money just allows city staff to, or you ultimately, because you'd be the one that would, you know, approve it through a development agreement or a purchase, real estate purchase agreement. So there'd just be money in the budget to the prior right of ways. One that's been talked about is potentially trying to acquire some additional right of way onto 17 South. This is just an example of how this could work, but we'd have some money potentially to acquire, this land, or if there was again like a arterial road that was going through a piece of property, we might not be able to exact full arterial width portion out of the developer, and so this could be used in that sense.
And you can use tax funds, I think that's what you've got, but or as long as they're.
Yeah, thank you. That's the source.
Let's see in that one, in that fund.
So with the budget included, you would have a balance. So with incoming, your net income would be up 216 positive with the budget. So the increase in fund balance, so the total expense income tax for 38.
This is one of those line items I think you'd even appropriate more. And I think you would still have the control over this budget because those expenses we could coordinate you as a city council. Stormwater funds, we're getting there. How's everyone doing? Anyone need a break?
I wouldn't mind a restaurant, right?
Yeah.
The record will pause for the.
No, I was just thinking that this is gonna be on Emily's recording. Wanted more, I'm like, no.
Yeah, that's really, kind of what I mean, all the chocolate there.
Okay, so I think we only have 8 slides, so there is a light at the end of this, and we're nearing that light. So I won't belabor the point. I think everyone knows that we need to address the storm drain fund. This is just a way to look at the performance. But I think everyone knows that net operating income is in the deficit, and that's what this shows. Based on this approach, and you can see, it's just a return on asset ratio that looks at the assets and net income off that, and it's a negative number. And in part, the thought is that how quick, if you're in business and you have assets, you want that asset to be making money, and this is a fund that is a business type fund, and so you need to have assets making money for replacement of the infrastructure. And that's what's not occurring right now. And it's been, for over a decade in that position. So right now we're at $3. As we looked at, let's say we're operating at this year is 700,000 that we need to include. So it's essentially revenue right now is 300,000. So if you multiply it, we're at least doubling the fee to getting close to, would be 2.5 times. So right way to say it. The fee, so it's going to be, it could, be upwards of $8, $9. Certainly at least $6, I would think. I'm just guessing. Just using some budget numbers to sort of drive to what I think a reasonable fee might be, and you can see where that would put us in relationship to some of these other cities. And these numbers were at least 20 last fiscal year, so I don't know if they've made changes since
Those other cities, they're on the low end, they need to raise their fees as well.
Yeah. Okay.
So what are we proposing raising to?
And there is no official proposal. I was using the back of the budget numbers, just to sort of suppose what that might be. And we'll have better numbers when we actually do the analysis, and we have a financial consultant help us and look at different alternatives. So that's forthcoming.
Sounds like it's
We have done, one of the pieces that will also play into our impact fees that we're working on for storm drain is looking at impervious surface and coming up with, the fee will be based upon the amount of impervious surface for the development type. And so not only for the utility fee, but the impact fee, and Ryan and Gardner and Ed have been working on that analysis, and we think we have that piece done. So now it's on to looking at the budget and some of these expenses and what kind of revenue will need to be generated.
So is it coming out that it's just going to be interrupted ground? Is it just going to be interrupted ground, or is it going to be per size of lot?
It'll be based on impervious area per lot on coverage. Based on how much, what would you expect the site to generate in terms of the site? non-runoff. We did have it that way originally for the impact fee, and then we previously changed it based on the developed acre, which we had some issues with. So we're actually go back to the impervious area model. It's a direct correlation, and it makes more sense from a proportionality standpoint.
Obviously, that matches with state regulation.
I'll put in addition that Sean's done a good analysis on. Perhaps we don't even have all of the costs in the storm fund as far as admin services. Allocating payroll services that are directly related to storm drain, telephone, insurance, and maintenance. Kind of an allocation which probably won't hurt back. The general fund, so I mean, there'll be another $100,000+ cost, but those are all at this point, and they're not included in the 26 budget.
Yeah, good point. I'm glad to mention that.
The initial analysis it was more geared towards when the stormwater permits were being implemented, and we had certain costs to cover for public education and different aspects of the permit. And I think that's the way the original fee was based more on that, more than looking at the operations, the maintenance, things like that.
And one of the big, there's, I think West Haven's unique in the sense that there's a lot of sloughs that run through the city, and that those are storm drain conveyances that serve as essentially the outfall for our stormwater system, which I think is fantastic. They're naturally occurring. And so instead of having to pipe our outfall, we just have the ability to essentially, drain and release into these sloughs. But there is some maintenance that comes with those sloughs that really hasn't been done in a long time. And that's one of the items that needs to be caught up. And it is important, because there's a lot of water that runs through these sloughs, a lot of sediment builds up, which hinders capacity. And so they do need to be maintained, they need to be dredged. Here is what we think is the first priority, is the wetland area and slough that runs through the wetland area at Country Park. That's what's included in this year's budget, this year being fiscal year 26, next year's budget. You can see on the Hooper Slough, there's some additional maintenance that needs to occur in Howard Slough in future fiscal years. We've generally thought of about $125,000 going specifically for this type of maintenance. There's other maintenance lines, and if you read and refer to the memo, you can see all the maintenance that goes into, just to name a few, street sweepings included, jetting out pipes, catch basins, and essentially making sure that they don't fill up with sediment. All those things are part of operating and maintaining the storm drain system.
So is the segment length in feet that 3,313 feet or
I'm sorry, what's that?
the segment length?
Yes.
So that is 3,313 feet. Okay.
There's also some projects that need to be done. And these are three notable ones. And this has been in existence for some time. There's still some exploration that needs to be done from an engineering perspective, but essentially what's happened is, for some reason, and we don't know if it was an in the field mistake or on the paper, with the construction drawings, if the mistake was made there, but somehow the irrigation system and storm drain system got interconnected. And so we need to separate out those. This is at the intersection of 2200 South, 2200 West. So what's being proposed is that red line is the irrigation. So the irrigation, this would be the catch basin right here, and this dash line would represent a new line that would drain into a manhole, storm drain manhole.
And this was actually found through the review of the West Haven Village project on 2200.
Oh, yeah.
When they were laying out their storm, that's how we discovered this.
That's why there were so many people standing on that corner for a long time.
Probably all scratching their heads to know where it was going.
Pipes the same color or something.
That's interesting.
Yeah. There's some other ones. There's two more. Interesting. This next one isn't that exciting, but this is mitigation of a catch basin. So this is the city's salt shed. So we recently had a storm drain audit come, and the inspectors noted that this catch basin right here was in too close a proximity to the salt. And so we would need to essentially eliminate this catch basin, fill it in and reslope the property so it would drain away. And as long as it's, my understanding, within beyond 50 feet, we would meet the requirement. So that's what this project is. It's 25,000 in order to come into compliance with.
That's a state directed mitigation.
Maybe this is a really ignorant question, but can we not move the salt?
That's a good question. That's merit.
I was gonna ask the same question.
Why not
I
answer?
don't know how it works over there.
Do the salt, then I don't know, I would think, you have a different public works director, he may look at it differently, it's certainly a fair question to ask.
Yeah, let's ask. I'll dig a little deeper.
It's covered, I think, so it doesn't get down, frozen, could be salt, something like.
The whole interesting thing is that they don't care if the salt goes down in the rain when it rains. It's when it's just getting transported in proximity. So ultimately, all the sand or the salt does get in streams anyway.
That's what they spread on the street, which goes down the drain, right?
Yeah.
It's just one of those where you statutory requirements that is 25 feet from the 50 feet across the whole storage area. And I think the fix we're proposing, just filling it in, is probably the least expensive option we're able to come up with.
Okay.
We'll explore that a little further. Great question. Oh, this one was a little interesting. It's unfortunately, it's a little hard to see, but this homeowner, this is in the Windsor Park area. This homeowner built a pool, and for some reason, this is our storm drain line, this red line. And when they built the pool, they severed the storm drain line, and so obviously it doesn't flow. The easement itself, it looks like this storm drain line was outside of the easement. The easement down is shown down here to outfall to, I think, is this the Howard Slough? Or, anyways.
That one's causing a negative impact on the adjacent property owners, that's important to our attention.
Yeah. So the idea is we essentially abandon this line since it's already been damaged and create a new line that outfalls to the
And
slough.
the gentleman being affected will grant us the easement. Acquisition required to relocate it.
This one is 84. It's kind of expensive.
Wouldn't the homeowner have been alerted when they dug for their pool and broke a line? I mean, that would be like, oops.
I think one of those things you don't know there's a problem until the problem happens, and I guess it took a couple of years for it to manifest on the neighbor's property.
Contractor probably did it and didn't tell the homeowner. It's not
Oh,
probably
yeah,
the
that's
homeowner.
probably exactly what happened.
So Larry owes us some money, that we're saying.
Yeah, we could go after him.
And we talked about the admin fees. So this is a potential expense in future fiscal years, but we try to identify all those expenses for purposes of this utility fee analysis, what those will be. So we'll talk more about this through the utility fee process, adoption process. So with that, there are some things, this is a punch list of things that we're still working on within the budget. You've given us some other good direction and guidance, and I don't know if there's anything specifically that I need to mention here now, but I would just say, since we have Ryan and Andy here, I know it's long, but I just love to have them mention anything that I might have missed or that I think might be important for them to know relative to this budget or financial picture of the city.
Like we captured, I'm still concerned about the district, the shared building, moving forward on that, coming up with some sort of agreement. whether just decide on a percentage or some kind of high level agreement so that the district can move forward. And their estimates about the impactful part. I think that's probably but that's around impact, impact on balance, and storm drain was another concern.
Things like that, I think it's great that you're able to accelerate the Windsor Park East with the old ARPA money that's become unrestricted to get that park in place and not have to wait on impact fees to slowly come in and get that project funded.
Sean has taken a very detailed approach. I mean, you can see the expansion of the spreadsheet. Just we have like line item very clearly. Comfortable that.
He hasn't put that much time into it.
Works Fridays and Saturdays.
I see.
It's what it is, double it.
I think he's just double vision. He's, you know what, when I drive by
That
on
doesn't
Friday,
seem high.
on Friday
doesn't
and
sound high.
Saturday, Sean's car's here. He's been here very much so engaged in this, trying to get it. So we really appreciate your time spent on this and for you guys too, your efforts on this. I think, do we need to, I mean, I'm just asking maybe for the council, how would we be best to negotiate or work with the district on this to get this project, you know, figuring out how we want to do it financially? And is that, what's your recommendations, I guess,
How
for
we
that?
should get involved on.
Is there rules like piercing the corporate veil kind of thing, going between the city and you can do whatever we want?
You could,
No,
you
it's
could
two
enter
separate
it into like an interlocal agreement and have the
Okay.
city owe the district or the district owe the city. Then the other party could get external financing through bonds.
And that would just be drawn up by our attorney, which they have another attorney now, right? Isn't that right?
They do not, well, I think they have a conflict attorney that we can draw from.
Okay.
And I think what we maybe should do is just get, Amy and Ryan and Amy, and John and just start putting things down on paper, different scenarios and start creating and drafting an MOU and whether that's the beginning and forerunner of an interlocal agreement. But I think coming up with just different strategies, as far as legal structures, thinking about, you know, the structure, doing the structure, if we're in a bond and getting a municipal advisor, just asking all these questions and sort of.
Yeah, and I don't know if we have enough data. You know what I mean? We don't even have a cost estimate, but I feel like the district, without a formal agreement with the city, takes on risk that, you know, if they proceed with the building and the city decides to go a different way, anyway, I feel like there's gonna be some type of.
Does that sound like the best way to do it? You
I
guys have
think
any other
it's the best way to
suggestions?
do it, yeah. Get Amy involved.
I mean,
We've done a few of them. I mean, interlocal agreements. And
Yeah.
pretty experienced with it. So.
but I think, you know, legally we have to do it the right way so that either party doesn't get damaged in the process, but. I'd like to see it kind of get moving forward so they can do what they need to do and the city can, you know, work
Absolutely.
with that process. Sorry.
Financially speaking, I think it makes more sense for just one entity to go out to external financing. We could save some costs on all council and issuance and all that. All those kind of things that could.
It kind of makes sense, even being on that board, it seems like it would make more sense for them because they're the ones that want to move forward with it faster. And then we could, you know, kind of lean off whatever comes about with repayments or paying them back. Whatever we need to.
I don't know if they can do a municipal building authority, and we don't need to get too far into it, or we can.
I don't think they could. We could,
So, but these are the things that we could sort of strategize as a group and sort
And
of.
then you can bring it to the council.
Mhm.
Does that sound all right? for
Yep.
everybody? Any other questions on the budget or?
I know that I ask this every year, but we know that we're gonna have to go forward with a property tax and I don't know when in that timeline, I know that it's gonna have to do with probably police.
Law
and
enforcement would be.
law enforcement, but as we can understand that and get ready to do that, because I think that's gonna be a big communication process that the sooner that we kind of know that's gonna be coming up within the next 2 years, after that, you guys can do whatever you want to do.
Do you think it'll happen within the next years?
You know, I just say that the last time they did this was before any of us were here, but they just kind of threw it out there and said, this is what we're gonna do,
But
which,
that, there was a lot of other mitigating factors to that.
yeah, but I think we wanna do it in the most, proactive and, best way, so that as we start moving forward with that, we can say, okay, we know this is coming, let's kind of.
Yeah, I think, I mean, just my recommendation would be that we probably need to come up with a futuristic plan on how we want to do it, or if we want to continue working with Weaver County, you know, and just kind of weigh out the balances on it. But policing is safety, public safety is, that's our number one priority, really, across the board. And the cost of it is just rising every year, but it's not to say that we're not going to spend a lot more doing it on our own.
Right, I just, you know, and are we always going to be able to live by sales tax? I mean, we are so lucky that every year our sales tax increases and we're still living by sales tax, so I'm just looking to the future, okay, is there gonna come a time when we actually have to say, okay, we need to implement a property tax, so. Just.
Yeah, I kind of feel too like we're getting to the point where a lot of projects too, as a city starts to get bigger and grow. We're probably gonna need obviously more funding to fix and take care of the things that are out there. So, even though with like a Walmart and all the construction and different amenities through some of these buildings that'll follow throughout, we'll probably have a huge increase in our overall income through sales tax. However, you know, when you think about a property tax, and we get down to that point, you're really not looking at about a ton of money. Especially if you come in at your tax rate, depending on where you fall in, but I mean, you're probably gonna look at, let's just call it around $500,000 on that. And that's not gonna go as far as what some people think, but it depends on where we land with that, so.
And it's gonna be a huge thing with West Haven residents, so as we decide or start moving towards that.
I think it's starting to soften a little, only because I think people.
Yeah, old people are dying out, is that?
But I think, you know, people are still, I think, a little amazed that we don't have one, but I still, even though I know there's gonna be a mayoral change in Marion Slaterville, and the mayor has been less, you know, he wants to keep it without a property tax, but I think the city manager may want to change that over there. So we may see some times when we could possibly move together, do some things so it's not so impactful overall to the city in some ways. I don't know, there's just some things that we
Like to get it on our radar at some point and say, okay, we know this is gonna happen.
Anything else from the council or the staff? You guys have anything else?
Just thank you for considering all our requests.
Well, thank you for making that.
Yeah, we'll go talk later and deny most of them, but.
All right, this one's gone, this one's gone.
But I appreciate you guys bringing things up, because again, we don't know what's needed until we know what's out there, so that we can see what the costs are going to be and if it's gonna work out. And that's why we have city manager to help balance all that, so that it works out. Is there anything else from anybody? Okay. Well, did you have any?
I was just saying, just in closing, this will be on the next agenda, May 7th. There'll be a public hearing. Sounds like everyone is anticipating this, and okay. Well, you'll need to adopt something, so I think what we propose is I'll take out the generator project, and I think
And
that's it.
have that
No.
one, yeah.
Oh, yes. Yeah, we'll
Whatever Stephen wants.
cut it off. Okay, we'll make that.
We didn't, we didn't scare Damien off. I mean, did he quit while we were halfway through? the meeting?
He left a note on your desk, Stephen, when I'm done. when I'm out of here.
We'll track him down later.
Yeah, that's good. We're growing and we'll be good. Anything else? Okay, we'll move to our last item on our agenda, item number 9.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second. Any further discussion on adjourning? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we are adjourned.